have trouble with that. I'll finish up with this. We're going to blood drive, talk about Dustin.
Call to order. The regular meeting, the March 12th, 2019 regular meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education is called to order. Present we have Ms. Pitko, Ms. Leeper, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Gerber, myself, Mrs. Vitale, Dr. Jones, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Jacobson, Mrs. Maxincanelli, Mr. Peterson, Ms. Solari, and Mr. Rivera. Please stand for the pledge. Ms. Leeper, will you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good to see everybody after we were snowed out for our regular meeting in February. We have a full agenda, so we will try to be efficient but thorough. To get us started, why don't we start, Mr. Rivera, you want to start us off?
Good evening. All right, so recently on February 6th, Coach Shaughnessy had his 400th wrestling win, and the wrestling team took third at FCX, fourth in class double L, third at State Opens, and sixth at New England's. The girls ski team finished their regular season 22 to 0. They won first place in Class L division for the regular season and won the Connecticut State Championship, which will make their 7th state title in a row. The dance team won the state championship in hip-hop and came the top 3 in hip-hop and jazz at New England's. And the bowling team came in 2nd place and in CBI-IBL league and 2nd at the state tournament. And numerous teams qualified for states tournaments, including girls basketball, boys ice hockey, girls and boys indoor track, gymnastics, cheerleading, boys swimming, and fencing. We are very proud of our excellent athletic teams this season. Recently, this past Thursday, Ward hosted an American Cross hosted blood drive, which I actually took part in. Seniors and teachers took part in donating blood, which was a fantastic experience because each donor has the potential to save up to 3 lives. And also, one of our ward students, Dustin Brown, made it to the 2nd round of the AMC test.
And then on February 6th, we showed our welcoming side of Ward, and we welcomed 600 8th grade students and parents. For 1 hour, the students were led around with their parents by Ward students for a tour of the electives, and then on the 2nd hour, they met with administration in the auditorium. Recently, 22 students were honored at the Mustangs Personified, Values Personified, or MVP breakfast at our Barlow's restaurant. So we're very proud of them. And this past weekend, our Junior Achievement Business Challenge team placed 2nd among 12 schools in a business strategy competition. So we congratulate Ludlow for winning 1st place, and we're proud of the Fairfield teams for coming in 1st and 2nd. And our jazz band placed 1st at Norwalk High School in a high school jazz competition. And lastly, our boys basketball team just finished up their season. We got to play Ludlow a 2nd time in state playoffs, so as you can imagine, that was another spirited game. And Ward advanced to the next round against Waterford. Unfortunately lost, but we congratulate them on a very impressive season.
Does anybody have any questions for our students from Fairfield Ward before we get to Ludlow? All right. Welcome, Ms. Coolidge and Ms. Phillips. What's going on at Ludlow?
Hi. Yeah, sorry, we're late. So first we had the Freshman Forum on March 7th for, it's about underage drinking and other risky behaviors. The program is for freshman students and their parents to gain insight into the physical, social, and legal and emotional impact of alcohol, vaping, and other substance abuse by teenagers. And on March 21st, we have FLHS preparing and serving dinner for 50 of our neighbors at Operation Hope. And then we have Project Runway, where seniors are able to walk in the school fashion show, where local stores will be providing outfits for them to walk in the show. And then for sports, we have March 14th to the 18th. The varsity cheerleaders will be traveling to Disney World for the national cheerleading competition, defending our 2018 national title. And then the girls ski team has won the state championships 7 years in a row this past weekend. And then we also have our accreditation visit from NEASC, where the teachers will be coming in and observing other teachers and students to see what's been going on.
All right, so juniors are currently in the process of registering with the National Honor Society, and it's a great opportunity for Ludlow's high-achieving students to take advantage of our many academic opportunities and also engage in several tutoring and philanthropic it's not my day today, philanthropic projects. Yesterday, Mr. Parisi and Mr. Nolf, one of Ludlow's most dynamic duos, held their annual Taste of the Trail event. Every year they do a trip to Montana over the summer, inviting students to go over Lewis and Clark's famous expedition. They featured a bunch of dishes from the trail itself, and they were all authentic and included great flavors like dill and venison. It was pretty interesting, to say the least. And I don't know if you already mentioned it, but Ludlow and Ward's joint fencing team qualified for team states, so we will be advancing further and hopefully taking home a few medals.
Great stuff. Anybody have any questions for our students from Ludlow? Mr. Peterson?
Well, I might just add that several of us were at the NEASC function over the weekend. I really very much appreciate the reception hosted by your principal, Hatsis. It was very nice, and we had a nice performance by the Ludlow a cappella group as well, which was very impressive.
You guys are welcome to stay or be on your way. Thank you for joining us and for updating us on everything that's going on in the high schools. It's nice to hear from you guys.
Thank you.
Moving on to public comment. If any members of the public would like to address the board, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. We allow 3 minutes for public comment and for agenda items only. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our district improvement plan mid-year update. Mr. Cummings.
Good evening, Mike Cummings, Chief Academic Officer. I know that you've received the update on the district improvement plan in advance, and I'm here to see if you have any questions, comments, thoughts you want to share with us. I'm ready for anything, so.
Mr. Dwyer?
In looking through it, with the exception of the Newcomers Academy, it did not appear as though, or I should say it in the positive, it appears as though either progress or things were completed on all the other items. Am I reading that correctly, or did I miss something?
No, Mr. Dry, you are reading that correctly. We've made progress on pretty much everything on here, except for, as you say, the Newcomer Academy.
And when you say in progress, since some of them are expected to be finished by June of 19 or September of 19, are you anticipating that all of will meet those deadlines for the ones that are still in progress?
I am.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Maxinelli?
Following up on the Newcomer Academy, just to be clear, due to low enrollment, because again, I think the idea and the concept I'd been quite excited by, and I know that our staff had gone out to other districts to see how they're doing this program. I don't assume for a minute that the low enrollment means that our numbers of English language learners has gone down. This is solely an indication of students who had been willing to leave their home school to go to a different site. Is that the idea here?
It was really more a combination, though, of as we've talked about in the past, the students are assessed on the 4 levels of the last links, with levels 1 and 2 being the students with the most need. We had very few students move into the district over the course of the summer at that level 1 or 2.
Okay.
And those were the students that really were targeted for this.
Right. Okay, all right, so then I was incorrect. Thank you. And I was curious more about the idea of teaching world language with applications. I was wondering if you could tell us more about that.
I can attempt, and fortunately Ms. Frankel's here as well. What we're looking at is the idea of, as you well know, one of our challenges at the elementary, particularly in K2, is instructional time. So we're looking for something that would be relatively low impact and could begin to initiate students in a world language program. Partly what's driving this is a budgetary issues, the instructional time issue, and also the idea that eventually trying to find the number of people who could staff this adequately. I would say what we're attempting is easy, earlier entry into this that we would then look to potentially expand with additional, working as we are already to find more time in the K2, but also address the staffing and budget issues.
So I guess I'm unclear on how this would be done. What's the vision for this?
The idea of this is some type of interactive program that would focus on world language, I think relatively simple skills. You know, the idea of that would be appropriate for that age group, K2, the letters, numbers, colors, those types of things. And it would be done during, say, like an activity period as a center, those types of things.
So there's no, and just throwing this out there, but there's no thought that this is something that even someone uneducated in the language, which I don't assume that our elementary school teachers, Renaissance men and women, though they already are, but again, having only looked at a couple of other world language curriculum that went down to these really lower grades where it truly was hello, numbers, colors, that there's no idea of that could be incorporated into the language, the language time, the math time that, and again, I'm not saying with perfect pronunciation or anything like that, but there's, and obviously that would have to be supported by PD to say, let's everyone consistently doing this, but I guess I don't like the idea of putting the little kids on screens.
Well, and I apologize because that's not, I wasn't clear. I think that's, you just talked about the idea of integrating. That's what we would try to do.
Oh.
But I meant, what I was saying is that we would try to do that through an activity type of period in that type of format. We also would have to look at our current staffing at the elementary school, the teachers who are teaching 3-5, and consider some type of overview, supervision that they can do with the classroom teachers to support as well. While they wouldn't necessarily be in the classroom for that, how could they oversee it?
Right. All right, so that's certainly something I'm interested in hearing more about, because I don't want us I totally, obviously all of us are very acutely aware of the budget aspect, but acutely hoping that that doesn't get dropped. And then regarding the science curriculum and the rollout, what is going to be the nature of the, and I know there's no data right now, what is going to be the nature of the feedback we're going to get once this testing does happen, and knowing we're not setting a high bar on this first run through and that we will grow from there.
Right.
But what is the nature of the feedback in terms of the timeline?
We should be getting feedback. The idea here is that the feedback would pretty much follow the SBA timeline. So I would,
Which we'd at first been told would be very quick.
yeah, you know, right now the districts are getting results back right around the 4th of July, beginning of July. If NGSS assessment results are that timely this first year, that would be terrific. But they will be, if not, they probably will come later in the summer. The first year, I think, of SBA actually came in August. It actually came right when school began. We got to get individual student reports. We'll get the reports by school, by teacher, those types of things. Same type of reporting format out there as we do for SBA.
Okay. So in other words, it won't be able to help inform summer curriculum work. It'll be something that will be tackled in the start of the new year.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Peterson, did you have your hand up? Or are you before? I thought you did before. Ms. Leeper and then Ms. Scrubber.
Just a quick follow-up question on the Newcomer Academy. There wasn't the demand this year in the elementary and middle school grades, but should there be the demand next year or the coming years, will this be something that is still ready to support those students?
We, Mr. Arnone and I spoke today about the need to, we had teachers last year, our EL teachers, who were available during the summer to assess students during the course as registrations happen. We'll continue to do that this summer. we'll implement a program at any level that we feel is, has the students to make it move forward. I also want to point out that while that did not go forward in elementary and middle, we've really taken a great advance with training for our classroom teachers and our EL teachers in strategies around EL instruction, and we've been very happy with both the trainer for that, but the progress we've seen with classroom teachers being able to better integrate and support those students in the classroom.
That's great, thanks.
Ms. Gerber?
Yeah, on the page 8, the middle school schedule, so it says in progress with expected board presentation in May, June 2019. So once we get the presentation, would that be something that would still not be implemented until 2021? So you'll just present it to us and then kind of go back and fine tune it and then ideally have it ready to go for the
We
following
want to bring you a
school.
working concept of a potential new schedule, the reasons for that, and get your input and feedback.
Right, okay, thank you.
Mr. Dwyer?
The world languages became a budget issue 8-9 years ago. Some of us on this board have been pushing to get it back in, but as I understood the discussion over time, it's not just a budget issue, it's a time issue. And is it still correct that the principals struggle with the allocation of instructional time between world language and language arts, and that's still an open debate as to how to accomplish both goals?
That is correct.
Okay, and I just comment, I thank Dr. Jones and yourself and the staff who, it's not easy to stay true to a, plan over time and to keep focused on it. So I thank you for keeping focused on it.
I actually have one question. Can we just have an update on the elementary program facilitator position? Is it working out the way that you expected? Do you see the position growing or changing at all next year?
I would say that's the implementation of that program has been a great success, unqualified success. I think most importantly, it's accomplishing what we wanted, which one of the primary targets was to increase the elementary principal's time in classrooms, out in the building, really being a presence in classrooms to assess what's going on, assess program implementation, work with teachers, better direct resources. There's no doubt in my mind that that's happening at every building. The other part of that is from the other major component of that role was to build special education leadership skills around the PPT 504 process. That work has been consistent. Mr. McCusey, Mr. Arnone have been meeting monthly with the EPFs in training sessions to support them in that implementation, to bring greater consistency across the 11 elementary schools in PPT implementation, goal setting, those types of things. And I will tell you that we've been very fortunate, and fortunate has something to do with it, but it's also skill sets, in hiring 11 terrific people to do that. Every one of them has shown growth in the role, even those who were primarily IITs before this. So it's been another, one of our goals in the district improvement plan is to increase teacher capacity, leadership skills at all levels. It's been a major force of growth at the elementary school, and I think it will only continue to broaden and deepen our work at elementary over the coming years.
Thank you. One more question. Dr. Jones, I know there's some things on hold just for technology, for the budget for this year. Do you foresee that possibly influencing whether or not we're going to complete some of these things on this list?
No, the items that are really on hold, most of those are replacement for projectors and printers and things of that nature around the district, and we're still very hopeful, like last year, that as we get towards the end of the year, we'll be able to get some of those updated, but it should not impact this plan at all.
And one last question about the website.
The website is it's in full rollout mode right now. As we get to June, they should have all of the template there. We were discussing this morning all of the individual schools, so they're getting ready to give the template to the school sites so that they can have their training to know how to update the websites. So it's coming. It's going to be beautiful.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson?
And that will be ADA compliant?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any last questions for Mr. Cummings? No? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're moving on to a curriculum status update for world language.
I'll just take a brief moment and introduce Ms. Eileen Frankel, and she can introduce the teachers who are with her this evening. Both our world language presentation and our business presentation have involved a numerous group of teachers during the course of the year, have done an awful lot of preparation, and I know there's a lot of pride in the work they're going to show you. So.
I think it's on. Is it on?
Thank you, ladies, and we'll let you guys introduce what you're about to present.
Do we need to introduce ourselves first and then?
Please, yes, that would be great if you could just give us your names and what you teach and what school you're at. Perfect. Just so we know who you all are.
All right. Good evening. My name is Eileen Frankel. I'm the World Language Coordinator in the district, and I also teach 2 classes at Fairfield Ludlow.
Marta Mwambulukutu, elementary world language at multiple elementary schools this year, Riverfield, Sherman, and Jennings.
Nyla Sierra, Fairfield Ward. I teach AP Spanish and Spanish 31.
Bonsoir, dames et messieurs. My name is Elsa Cardoso. I teach French at Woods Middle School, 6th and 8th grade.
And I'm Peggy Shore, and I teach at Roger Ludlow Middle School, 6th grade, and at Fairfield Ludlow High School, Spanish 31.
Bien. Buenas noches. Soy Eileen Frankel, la coordinadora del programa de lenguas extranjeras en el distrito, grados 3 a 12, y doy 2 clases de español en Fairfield Ludlow. Good evening. My name is Eileen Frankel. I'm the World Language Coordinator for the district, grades 3 through 12, and I teach 2 Spanish classes at Fairfield Ludlow. I would like to thank the world language teachers who are here tonight and ask them to stand for just a moment. I would also like to thank those who have provided student work and photos for this presentation, and to all of the dedicated world language teachers in the district. In addition, I want to thank everyone who has supported my efforts in bringing this presentation to you tonight. I am here tonight to share with you our 21st Century World Language Program. The primary goal of the Fairfield Public Schools World Language Curriculum is to prepare students to be lifelong learners in an ever-changing global society by developing the ability to communicate effectively and interact with cultural competence to participate in multilingual communities at home and around the world. Sandra Savignon, author of numerous publications on communicative language teaching, writes, "Learning to speak another's language means taking one's place in the human community. It means reaching out to others across cultural and linguistic boundaries. Language is far more than a system to be explained. It is our most important link to the world around us. Language is culture in motion. It is people interacting with people. Studying a world language is far more than lists of vocabulary and verbs. It is a 21st century tool by which we can understand diverse cultural perspectives." As I respond to each of these questions this evening, I will demonstrate that our program allows our learners to cross cultural and linguistic boundaries. So what changes were made since the last curriculum revision in 2015? The curriculum that was passed by the Board of Ed in 2007 and 2009 was a typical document written based on a textbook where the emphasis was teaching about the language rather than teaching the students to use the language in meaningful ways. Let me first show you some student work to demonstrate this shift. This is an assignment previously given to level 5 students, primarily juniors, to practice the present tense, the use of the verb to be, and to practice clothing. After creating visuals, students were told to write 20 sentences. This student wrote 21, but they were simply strings of sentences. In today's standards, this would be scored at the novice level. We asked for sentences, and they gave us sentences. Here's an excerpt from the 2009 document. 3 of the targeted objectives were based on grammar. There was little opportunity for higher order thinking. This is an excerpt from our grade 6 level 1A curriculum adopted in 2015. It prescribes what learners will be able to do with the language by the end of the unit and the end of the year. Grammatical structures are taught in context and practiced in a variety of ways. Grammar is not one of the targeted learning objectives. Here, our 6th graders were asked to research specific information about the leaders of their adopted Spanish-speaking countries. Then they were asked to write a letter to the leader and tell who they were and ask questions about the lives of the leaders. The students had to use the language and structure they had mastered over the year. Here's an example of the student work sent to the President of the Dominican Republic. Here is the response by the President of the Dominican Republic. He says, "I am pleasantly surprised to receive your letter and know that you are 11 years old and only speak English. This means that it must have taken lots of energy to write me and take an interest in my hobbies." Just imagine the student receiving that response. So what were the changes that were made? This is a 2005 Connecticut World Language Curriculum Framework. The language of the interpersonal standard was vague, and the entire document recognized over 100 targeted learning objectives. When we wrote the curriculum way back in 2007, we spent days, if not months, assigning all of these indicators to our classes. They were color-coded. We had strips of paper all over the walls, trying to organize them. They were simply confusing. Our updated documents were written in conjunction with the 2015 World Readiness Standards for Language Learning. As you can see, the interpersonal standard uses language that is more powerful and descriptive. Learners must interact and negotiate, 2 skills required for interpersonal communication to occur in any language. The new standards are simple, yet more descriptive. They are supported by the 2017 revised can-do statements and proficiency guidelines created at the national level. These tell us what learners are able to do at a particular stage in their learning. It is very typical to see this visual hanging in classrooms and in the possession of our learners. It's called the path to proficiency, and the students follow the path. Instruction is now focused on the proficiency targets that have been assigned to each level and based on what learners are able to do with the language. Very briefly, you can see there are 3 levels. Each level is then divided into low, mid, and high. The novice level is characterized by lists and memorized phrases. At the intermediate level, we see the ability to use strings of connected sentences. And at the advanced level, paragraph length narration is evident. Our curriculum shifted from a textbook-driven curriculum with the textbook as the primary resource to a curriculum based on authentic materials, level appropriate and task appropriate. Topics, parts of the body, clothing, parts of the house, have been replaced by overarching themes based on the AP themes: contemporary life, global challenges, public identities. Grammar was taught in isolation, providing numerous rules that were often not understood and could not be applied. In our 2015 curriculum, grammar is taught in context and used in natural ways. The emphasis had been on one mode of communication, writing. Now we focus on all three modes: presentational and interpersonal, which are both written and oral, and interpretive, which is listening and reading. The curriculum is vertically and horizontally aligned within and among languages. Let's take a quick look at a thematic unit, Level 4, Italian. The AP theme is Global Challenges, the topic, immigration, and the essential question, how does immigration create and change communities? Learners read about, listen to, discuss, and write about the Italian immigration experience. The culminating activity is a trip to Ellis Island, where learners make connections to their own ancestors or about others who made the journey to America. After the trip, they must tell a story of immigration. This unit allows students to demonstrate their ability as communicators, innovators, and critical thinkers. I would now like to introduce three of the teachers who each have a brief story to tell. Video?
Yes, please.
Okay.
In elementary world language, we're spending more time having students interpret authentic materials. What that means is text or videos or audio that was created for native speakers and not just students that are brand new to Spanish.
El más común es el delfín nariz de botella. Se alimentan de peces pequeños.
This requires them to make meaning out of something perhaps unpredictable with a lot that they won't understand.
Necesitan oxígeno para respirar, pero pueden quedarse.
We're asking them to derive meaning from visual and contextual clues and connect that to what it is that they already know. Our program focuses on practicing more meaningful, spontaneous, and natural conversation rather than lists of memorized vocabulary. By aligning our curriculum to the actual can-do standard, we are preparing our students for the real world and for the unknown, not just as language learners, but as interpreters of the world around them. Thanks for watching and for supporting our program. Adios.
So just a little to add on. So what it looks like with our units is we start with more direct instruction where we're practicing those language structures that support our enduring understandings for the unit. As we bring those pieces together, as we synthesize those pieces, we practice more spontaneous conversation, and students are encouraged to take risks, even if they're not going to be 100% correct. So we combine and then we recombine language. My standout moments, the star moments for me, are those students who put together language in ways that I didn't teach them. So for example, we were talking about animals of the Galapagos Islands, and there was a student who, we had talked about, oh, where does it live? Does it live on the land? Does it live in the ocean? What's it like? Does it swim? Is it slow? Is it fast? And I had one student who wanted to say, well, a penguin is slow when it's walking, but it's fast when it's swimming. And they took these bits of vocabulary from different subjects, I guess, and put it together in a way that made sense. They said, oh, el pingüino rápido en agua, lento en tierra. And although it's not completely 100% grammatically correct, it's okay, and we celebrate it, and that encourages them to take risks. So that's just kind of a little snippet of what we do at the elementary language world language level. Elementary, you get it.
So, following what Marta presented, I'd like to share some occasions where my students did use French in an authentic situation in their daily lives in school. As I said before, and as you can notice, I'm not an English native speaker. Je suis française. So when my students come to my classroom, to my room, it's like they are going to France, because French is much easier for me. We speak French all the time, and they do absorb what I say. I teach 6th and 8th, and teaching these two levels, 6th and 8th in middle school, allows me to see how my students are doing, allows me to witness their progress. For example, when they finish 6th grade, they have other teachers for 7, and then they come back to my classroom for 8th grade. This allows me to compare, to see the progress that these kids are making towards proficiency. 99% of my students hear the first words in French from me. Some of them, because they don't take French in elementary school. Some of them have some knowledge of the country. They know a little bit about France and the other French-speaking countries, but not the language. So, witness them speaking in complete sentences or paragraphs by December truly amazes me, as well as amazes parents, and also other colleagues, other teachers in our school. Some days ago,
Wait. It's okay, it's okay.
That's technology going wrong. Some time ago, a couple of colleagues at Woods stopped by my room just to make some comments. My students were in the hallway practicing and speaking, and one of the teachers said, Elsa, we hear these kids speaking in French in the hallway. They are speaking to each other. What are they doing? And I explained to my colleagues the activity that they were doing and practicing, and one of them said, wow, I took French in high school, and I never was able to do that. I thought that that was quite a compliment. I was proud of the kids. I would like to share. I would like to share 2 occasions where my students surprised me with their comments. Some time ago, by December, one of the teachers made cookies, and she gave us, the other teachers, and I said, thank you for the cookies, they are delicious. And my colleague asked me, how do you say that in French? One of my students was passing by, and she said, merci pour le biscuit, délicieux. And Molly looked at me and she said, how are they able to say that? And of course, they hear that in the classroom. Sometimes they don't say everything right, of course. They are starting, they are learning, but they do communicate in the language. Another student, they were doing a writing activity in the classroom, and she asked me, Madame Cardoso, I want to say, comment allez-vous, but I don't want to say that in that formal way. I said, you should know the other one. It's comment ça va? And she goes, but no, there's something else. And I said, just ça va, because it's very informal. One student next to this one goes, quoi de neuf? And I said, where did you hear that? How do you know that? And she said, because you say that. When you come in and you greet us, bonjour la classe, quoi de neuf? I said, okay, but that one is really informal. You are not going to use that one when you are writing. So these are examples of how our students are indeed using the language in an authentic context and situation. I also would like to share with you some emails from parents. Some of these, mostly of these emails, I share with my principals and my coordinator. For example, this is a note from a 6th grade parent, and she says, hello, Mrs. Cardoso, this is just a thank you note. We are impressed with how much French our son has learning in your class, and we appreciate all you are doing to put him speaking his dad's native language. He comes home singing in French and telling us how to say things in French. My husband is from Haiti, and he is so proud to hear his son speaking his language. Another one, this is from an email from an 8th grade parent. Madame Cardoso, you are immensely supportive and encouraging of Devon's potential for languages and his journey to French. What he learned in 2 years, this student was an 8th grade student, but he started with us in 7th grade. He moved from another school. What he learned in 2 years is simply amazing. So much so that he is continuing his study of French in high school and has expressed interest in studying in Canada for college. This is a lifelong learner, as Eileen mentioned. And the last one, last year, this mother says, as the school year comes to an end, I would like to say that that it was a privilege and an honor to have you teach both my son and my daughter. The amount of French that they learned in a couple of years is incredible. Thank you for your motivation and enthusiasm. Et voilà. Ce sont les résultats. We can see the results of our program. Merci pour m'écouter.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. My name is Nyla Sierra, and I teach AP Spanish. So by the time that students get to AP Spanish, they have all these skills. They're able to negotiate meaning. They're able to take risk in speaking Spanish. And the themes that we talk about in AP Spanish are very relatable themes. So when they get to me, they're able to talk about everything, daily life, in Spanish. This year I'm focusing a lot on having students debate in Spanish. And some of the themes that they talk about are things that they are doing in class. Not too long ago, we did a debate on, is it a felony? Should it be a felony if copyright laws are violated? I feel that we need to teach students copyright laws because by the time they get to college, they're going to need to know not to violate copyright laws. So I had them listen to a podcast all in Spanish, and they had to take notes in groups together, and I put them in separate teams, and they took notes on the podcast, and then after the podcast, they had to debate the topic that I gave them. So I have a short segment of this debate, but my goal is for students to come out of my class being able to talk about things that they can do, that they do every day in life in Spanish. So if they go to let's say they go to Colombia and they are talking to someone, they could talk about anything. It doesn't matter that they're not speaking correctly, that they don't have the correct grammar. And so that is my main goal, and I'm seeing that kids are taking more risk. They just want to do it. And here's the shortest segment that I have. This was before we did the debate. They were taking notes.
proficiencia, tomarían ventaja de cooperación de los medios. Y es posible que los documentos y objetos que estuvieran seguros debajo de maquetes pueden llegar a las manos directas de las manos de personas malas. Y esto puede crear situación de la sociedad.
Es solamente protegen un pequeño número de personas y hay otras personas que tienen ideas pero no pueden crear sus productos porque los leyes del autor existen. Entonces los productos y los obras son más importantes que los creadores. Y también personas en países del tercer mundo no pueden conseguir acceso a medicina como AIDS porque este cuesta mucho y ellos no tienen suficiente dinero. Las medicinas son producidas por personas con patentes o leyes del autor. Si no es un delito violar las leyes del autor, personas en países del tercer mundo tendrán acceso a la medicina que necesitan.
Yo entiendo, pero escúchame por un minuto.
That's pretty good.
Si alguien quisiera usar todo de tu trabajo de clase de español, ¿te lo gustaría? Es el mismo circunstancia.
And he stomped them there. So they have fun at the same time while they're doing it. They don't even realize that they're learning when they're talking about these topics, but they're doing it.
Thank you all for sharing. On to the next question. So what has been done to implement the curriculum? Since the adoption of the curriculum in 2015, teachers have been given the opportunity to attend state, regional, and national conferences. We frequently have more than 10 teachers attending the state conference. In February, 5 teachers and I attended the Northeast Conference on the Teaching of Foreign Language. At our department meetings then, teachers share highlights of their new learning. We have invited a number of nationally known presenters to the district to provide additional teacher training. These are consultants to College Board, writers of AP exams, and other national exams, including the ALERA. Advanced Training is an online training tool which familiarizes teachers with the proficiency targets and how to support students to reach the targets. It provides clear explanations of the targets, unlimited access to practice exercises, and immediate feedback to teachers. Because it is online, teachers have the ability to work at their own pace. There were multiple work sessions during the summers of 2015 and 2016, as well as many release days during the school year to create common assessments and other support materials. The World Language Administrative Cohort is composed of the 5 building administrators at the middle and high school level who oversee World Language, Mike Cummings, and me. We meet periodically throughout the year to better ensure consistency in the district and to support the alignment between the levels. In October, the cohort and 1 elementary principal did walkthroughs at the elementary and middle school level. The introduction of the Chromebooks for grades 7 and grades 9 through 12 has facilitated the alignment of our world language curriculum to the vision of a graduate. Our students are using these devices to collaborate and become critical thinkers as they research about target cultures and then become innovators as they create infographics, slideshows, and other presentations. What adjustments have been made with the implementation and pacing since the curriculum adoption? Due to the nature of the curriculum, the implementation occurred over a 2-year period. In the fall of 2016, we implemented levels 1, 2, 5, 6, and AP. In 2017, we then implemented levels 3 and 4. Proficiency targets were set, and summer work focused on creating assessments and researching a bank of authentic materials. Some assessments have been adjusted and rubrics have been adjusted as well. Our work evaluating and revising assessments and rubrics is an ongoing process. What evidence has been collected to indicate growth and achievement? Our baseline data for levels 20 and 40 in all languages was collected from STAMP and ALIRA testing in the spring of 2018. STAMP determines language proficiency in 4 domains: reading, writing, speaking, and listening, in French, Italian, Mandarin, and Spanish. And ALIRA assesses reading proficiency in Latin. Both are adaptive and scored based on national proficiency guidelines. This data and the common language used in the scoring will facilitate meaningful discussions among the teachers and administrators as we support student growth along the path to proficiency. Level 2 is primarily composed of grade 8 students and high school students in their second year of a world language. This data, again, will help us focus on areas of strength and areas to target for improvement. Level 4 are students who have studied the language for 4 years at the high school or who have taken 2 years at high school, having begun in the middle school. Our Latin program is a 4-year program which begins in the high school. Seniors may opt either to take Level 4 or AP. AP exams are administered in French, Latin, and Spanish, and data is also collected. A score of 3 is considered qualified, 4 well qualified, and a 5 extremely well qualified. We also have collected data on participation rates. And again, all of this will help us make the next steps. What next steps are being considered? The Seal of Biliteracy is an award given to recognize students who have attained proficiency in 2 or more languages by high school graduation. In the state of Connecticut, proficiency is defined by attaining a score of intermediate mid in all 4 skills of modern spoken language and an intermediate mid in interpretive reading in Latin in grades 10, 11, or 12. Learners must also complete all English language arts requirements. Why award it? Not only does it recognize the value of language diversity and honor multiple cultures and languages in the community, it supports the preparation of students with 21st century skills that will benefit them in the labor market and as global citizens. We'll be using STAMP and ALIRA results to determine eligibility. The seal will appear on transcripts and on diplomas. We are finalizing the curriculum for the Introduction to Culture and Communication course, which is a 1-credit course designed to fulfill the new graduation requirement. It is a 3-unit course whose theme is contemporary life. As we learn more about proficiency, we will continue to modify assessments, aligning them to the academic expectations and the vision of a graduate. The data collected from STAMP, ALIRA, and AP will guide our work in areas of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Before closing, I would like to share with you a few other comments from teachers when they were asked, what changes have you seen in the past few years since we've adopted the new curriculum, the thematic units, and the path to proficiency? More willingness to speak more regularly in the target language, more detailed writing pieces, greater enthusiasm in speaking. They're fearless. They speak more fluently and can talk about more things. They know more about Latin American countries. More willing to experiment with the language. More willing to take risks. More open-ended speaking. Student reaction to the use of authentic materials has changed. When we first started using authentic materials, the students would freak out. Now they expect things that are authentic and are able to interact with these materials. And finally, the words of an 8th grader at the end of last year at Fairfield Woods, Anna Coltier.
At the beginning of the year when I did my benchmark, I was not very fluent. I answered 2 out of the 5 questions, and I answered them in short phrases, maybe less than a sentence each. And then I heard my benchmark for the end of the year. I was so shocked. I could not believe my ears. It was as if I was a completely different person. I was saying more than 5 sentences, and I was using transition words. And I just sounded fluent, and I elaborated a lot more.
Our program provides learners with all of these opportunities to communicate, to interact with cultural competence and cross-cultural and linguistic boundaries. Thank you all for your support of the World Language Program.
Thank you, ladies, for that presentation. Any questions for presenters? Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, just a few. Thanks very much for the presentation. Just to make clear, in terms of the stamp and the ALIRA data, that's going to be your baseline going forward for future evaluations. What's the timeline? At what point do you think that we're going to have data that will be comparable to kind of show us the progress of the shift?
Well, for this year, we are again testing in the level 2 and 4. We've asked to test now, starting next year in 2020, all levels so that we can show individual growth. So at the end of this year, we will have new data.
Great. I guess I just had another question about authentic sources. I wonder, in your presentation that you made that seemed as though those were, you said they were materials that were prepared for native speakers. Can you just give me a brief recap of why you think that that's a superior way to go versus a textbook, which is kind of I always imagine it's kind of curated content?
I guess most recently the national organization is highlighting the use of authentic materials rather than a fixed textbook. Authentic materials, the definition of authentic is made by a native, created for a native. We don't change the authentic material, we change the task to meet the needs. And in the video clip of the elementary students, they're developing their ears. If I talk to when I was in high school learning language, I was an excellent student. But then when I went to Spain the first time, I understood nothing. And I could not respond. So the idea of using the authentic materials allows the students to develop their ears in a real world way and also provides more interesting material rather than the dog is tall. I am tall.
Sure, well, I appreciate that. And in fact, as you were talking about that in the presentation, I remembered my middle school daughter, French, kind of coming home and wanting to watch Miraculous Ladybug on YouTube in French, which was, and my kids have just fallen in love with that. They watch the English version now, which I think it's a bit of a loss. A trick question along those lines, however, I see Mrs. Fedoric in the audience. What do we do for Latin in terms of authentic sources?
Well, we're still using the textbook. The ALIRA testing, however, does push us more into using more authentic materials.
But, like, I mean, do you use? I mean, you have only ancient sources. I mean, I imagine.
Right. Well, but
that's my point. There's no contemporary.
But actually, there's a newspaper that's written in Latin on a daily basis.
Well, I understand that there's a Finnish radio station that also does Latin on a daily basis. But,
right.
Otherwise, thank you very much. I really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
You absolutely can ask a question.
The seal of biliteracy thing, is that being implemented like soon, or is that now? Because like, is that on, like, will that be on my diploma?
Actually, the students in my AP class will be taking the stamp in a few weeks.
Okay.
We can't use the AP exam results because that comes out after graduation.
Yeah.
So you will be taking the stamp testing,
Also,
and it will be on your transcript.
So, okay, so I took Latin like freshman through junior year. Does that also count for that, like along with the Spanish, or since I didn't take it senior year, I won't have that?
Well, the seal of biliteracy
Yeah.
requires English and another language.
Yeah.
So you have to get at least the intermediate mid on the official testing. So just the fact that you're in my AP class is fine. However, you need to take the stamp testing to score at least a intermediate mid.
Yes. And then going back to your comment on the authentic sources, I will say that like in middle school when we had the sources that were more like English based, like they would have like an English speaker speaking Spanish. It was very easy to understand. However, this year when we've used a lot more authentic sources, like it took me quite a while to like understand what they were saying because of the accents and the different dialects of each culture. So it was definitely like a switch and more difficult, but it has proven very helpful in my Spanish career. So
well, when you walk out the door and you find yourself somewhere else, then you're really going to understand how important it is to have the ear.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question because I asked my Spanish teacher and she wasn't able to give me an answer yet. Will the stamp act count as a grade? The stamp test. Thinking about history.
What grade are you in?
What?
Are you a senior?
I'm in a senior year.
It will not count this year, no.
Ms. Phillips, do you have a question?
If I can reach. All right, so I just want to say that I absolutely adore the curriculum and how we're able to sort of engage with the culture directly. My only concern, I think, as a student at Ludlow, currently on my third year through the French program, is do you think at all we'll be able to implement something that can build more of a foundation for, I mean, it's not a problem for myself, but I am observing quite a few students in the class who they're hesitant to kind of engage with the material because they're intimidated, I think. And it's certainly not a larger issue, but I feel like they lack some of the grammar and stuff. I don't know if it's a problem with the curriculum itself, but it might be because like we're sort of in the year that sort of came in between the jumps. But if possible, we'd love to see some more stronger foundations concerning the tenses and things, because sometimes it can be hard to keep up. That's all. Thank you.
I did come prepared to answer a grammar question. So grammar is an important element of communication, but research shows that explicit teaching of grammar has little effect on people's language acquisition, comprehension, or writing abilities. Traditional approaches to grammar instruction that emphasize direct grammar instruction often encouraged memorized, rehearsed use of language. Additionally, many methods do not require students to understand meaning in authentic context, how grammar is actually used in communication. So I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. All of the latest research talks about not being so specific about teaching all of the verb forms and more, if you're understood, that's really the goal.
May I respond to the, in regards to that point of view? When I moved from Europe to the United States, I didn't know English. So I had to learn 7 years ago, I had to study. I took lessons for my pronunciation. However, I was able to go to a restaurant and without using one verb, I ordered all my food. I said,
I wish I could do that.
Soup, bread, chicken, and water, please. So my students, for example, if they go to France, they're going to ask them, oh, do you know French? Oui, nous parlons français. So conjugate verb être. Nobody. They are not going to need to know verb être by heart. And even if they don't know the verb, as this student that said to the teacher, translated in French, ce sont des biscuits délicieux. They didn't say a verb. They didn't say, they are delicious. She only said delicious, délicieux, without using a verb. But we understood her. Do you get my point?
Yes, I
Merci.
do. I think it's just because we were in the transitive year, but I definitely see, my brother is currently in the middle school French program at Ludlow. He absolutely adores it, and his ability might soon be surpassing mine, so
okay.
Thank you for that. Yeah. No, but thank you. I very much appreciate that, and yeah, thank you so much.
And also in regards to the authentic materials. For example, last week in France, in Paris, students went on a strike about the environment. I'm on Unit 3 with my 8th graders. So they are not learning about the environment anymore, but I took the opportunity to show them France 5, the channel, the French channel, and I said, let's listen to this. This just this just happened in Paris yesterday. And they listened and they understand mostly of the content. That's an authentic material. Instead of giving them a fabricated reading and saying, let's read about La Grève à Paris, what is this about? They read, but we transform the sentences for them instead of showing them l'authenticité du matériel.
Also, one thing I've noticed that music is such a powerful tool, especially in our classes, whereas I remember before we jumped to this immersive curriculum, we had to go through like all these verb songs and stuff. But now we actually, we go through and we analyze lyrics to songs that are authentically French and French-Canadian, and they're absolutely beautiful, and we get a taste of the culture, and it's so crystal clear. It's really a wonderful project.
And thank you for mentioning that about the French-Canadian, because this is, again, authentic material. I'm an authentic resource. I'm from there. So students notice the accents. When we show them the videos, one of them said, you say bien, but she said bien. I said, because she's from Canada, and je suis from France.
Thank you. I'm going to have to let a board member actually.
Oh no, I just have a comment.
You guys go.
I suddenly feel the need to apologize to all of my teachers at Woods and Fairfield High because we used French and Spanish to talk behind the other teachers' back in class, everything that we learned.
Well, you use the language.
Yeah, that's all that counts.
All right. Mrs. Maxinelli.
A couple of comments and a couple of questions. I will actually, though, piggyback on that comment because I know my daughter's taking French in college now, and she did describe some frustration with sometimes students just want a direct answer of, wow, you know, that means to have. It's that simple. And describe it as a bit of a frustrating experience of not sometimes having that confidence building boost of just, I just want to know this, and can I get some of that direct instruction? So, and again, I hear your point. It could very well be this transition. She's the old and coming in with the new that are all excited about this. But there definitely has been some stumbling blocks. And this is someone who loves and embraces the study of language. She's majoring in it. So, but first, just a couple of comments. First of all, I'll just say thank you for including that letter from the President of the Dominican Republic, which I think might be one of the cool, I challenge any other department doing a presentation to come up with something that matches that. I think that is really cool. And then I'd also say I have a different take on the example with French of where your colleagues commented on how were they able to say that about the French comment. Because the reaction I had is, how cool is it that the response with adults there was to pipe right up with the language confidently. So to me, it wasn't about the how are they able to, but how cool is it that they even did it. So that would be my own wrinkle on that. One concern I had with the authentic sources, which I think obviously that's a robust way to really get them into it, but how do you then ensure a consistent delivery? Because one teacher is choosing to, incorporate this authentic resource, and I'm not advocating for no, you must stick with the textbook, but it does at least give a degree of assurance as someone is, it's one thing in a building, but when you're transitioning from 2 different middle schools into a single high school, I don't know if you could speak to that.
Yeah, we do. We have common assessments. So in grade 6, we do 2 units, and there are common assessments across all 3 middle schools. There are common assessments. Again, Spanish and French use the same speaking assessment. They use the same writing assessment because we're doing the same things in the 6th grade, whether it's Spanish or French. In 7th grade, there are 3 units. There are also common assessments. Again, we're working on them and changing them and tweaking them and improving them constantly. In grade 8, there are 4 units. In grade 9, there are 4 units. In grade 10, 11, and 12, there are all 4 units. And there are common assessments so that how the teacher gets the students to the reading assessment, it's the same reading assessment across the board.
There are also a lot of shared materials.
Okay.
We have Rubicon Atlas, and we are constantly sharing materials.
Microphone, please. I'm sorry.
We can talk like, is this on? We can hear. Use the other one. Use this one. We have shared assessments, but we also have shared materials. I am fortunate enough to teach 6th grade, and this year teaching 9th grade. So I have the students who started with the new curriculum at the high school level. And I would say, and having taught 9th grade before, these 9th grade, well, we get them from 5th grade into the middle school, into the 6th grade, and there's a difference now. They come in, they're much more comfortable, as you can see. The letter that my students wrote to the leaders of their country, that was done near the beginning of the year as an exercise to how do we ask questions? What kinds of questions can we ask? And what do we want to know? So seeing what happens, I can see, I've seen the future because I see students in the 9th grade now. And they are more able to adapt to changes they pick up the need for conjugating. They can hear their errors. They self-correct. And that's something that I did not usually see in the 9th grade. And so I'm really curious to see as we move forward, the upper grades will then get the benefits of what's happening down here.
And that obviously would be very exciting to see. When you talk about, though, again, the reduced focus on grammar, and I understand the decreased amount of focus on that grammar in isolation. However, does the AP Spanish test, AP French test, have that much flexibility of, oh, it's fine that you tried and you tried to speak it and good for you, and however, you did in fact conjugate the verb wrong. You did in fact pronounce it wrong. Right. Is it, I'm not familiar with the verbal aspect of the test.
Right,
So.
you're looking at the 2 Spanish AP teachers in the district. We both have very solid scores. The scores have not dropped at all. There is room for error. Even in my native language, which is English, I make errors. We all do. So within the AP framework, error is allowed. Gross error, of course not. But what's the difference between a 4 and a 5? More precision. But, and again, don't misunderstand, we teach grammar, but it's in context. So instead of teaching every singular irregular preterite, and I don't know how many there are, but there are a lot. And instead of teaching every single irregular preterite and memorizing them, and then when you go to the foreign country and someone says, okay, let's have a conversation in the past, you're not going to stop and say, hold on, let me get my list out. You don't know them either. So at least now the kids are working and using the words that they need to communicate. And so some very remote word, the verb teñir, I used to teach that all the time. It was my favorite verb. Nobody uses it.
Even I don't have a favorite verb. I think that's pretty cool.
I had my favorite verb, right? So that's a huge difference.
Okay, and then I guess my last question regarding the seal of biliteracy, you talk about that they have to have achieved intermediate and mid, and I'm looking at the page of the slide that have the scores, and there's nothing that's intermediate mid, so I don't have a good sense of how our students fare in terms of qualifying for that. Like when I'm looking at level 4 stamp for French, Italian, Mandarin, and Spanish, it's meeting or exceeding, approaching, and emerging. Is it the meeting or exceeding?
It's the
That
meeting.
is what's qualifying for
It's the
intermediate
meeting.
mid.
Correct.
So right now, again, based on just right now, there would be a total of 18% who could qualify, assuming those 18% are also the ones who are hitting it in writing and reading.
Right.
Okay. And again, I'm not expecting at this point that it's necessarily that much higher. I mean, I think this is meant to be a very, very lofty achievement. So I just want to make sure that I was reading it correctly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? I have a couple. Oh. I'm looking at the page for AP participation rates for French, Latin, and Spanish. Do we offer AP Italian or Mandarin, and what is the participation? If we do,
We do not.
we do not.
We presently do not.
Okay, and do you think that the fact that we don't offer those classes in the middle school has anything to do with it, just in terms of track that kids are on? I just find it interesting that those two, students don't start as young as some of these other languages.
Well, it's certainly an option. I mean, if students are introduced, the earlier they're introduced, the easier it is to learn the language. We have a solid Italian enrollment, for example. If that were started earlier, I'm sure there would be more students involved in it.
I was just wondering if you've done any, asked that question or tried to figure out why there wasn't the participation rate. Why didn't they carry it all the way to the AP level? That's it. Thank you all.
One quick follow-up
yeah.
to that. Regarding, well, quite frankly, advertising, because I obviously so I guess it's between Latin, Chinese, Italian, those are the 3 languages that are added as of high school. I'm not missing anything, right? Do those high school teachers have the chance to go into the middle schools at all to advertise themselves as an not that they're trying to steal the Spanish and French students, but but as another option, because obviously there are some middle school students who will not have taken a language at all, so they're truly right for the pick. I don't know if that's the right phrase to use, but are you allowed to go in? Is that part of your program that you're able to go in and make students very aware of those options?
We have a department video that was created by a Ward student 2 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago, that we send down to the middle schools each year, and it highlights all 5 languages. This year in particular, the 2 Mandarin teachers went and visited the 3 middle schools.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Oh, students, do you have any last questions? I don't want, Ms. Coolidge, I think you had your hand up and I cut you off.
Yeah, okay. So, back to the Latin question, I was actually a teacher's assistant for the first semester in the junior Latin class, which I was also supposed to join the AP Latin class, and I think that the lower participation rate is just because it is a singular class, just because there aren't as many kids taking it. So, for example, this year I couldn't take it because it conflicted with my another AP, so I wasn't able to, which I know happened for a few kids, so that there weren't as many kids. But for the authentic sources for that, a lot of the time I had to help the teacher look up videos that would, be pertinent to current event issues. So we would oftentimes go back to the history of Rome and then tie that back into current day issues. So although that's not technically the language, most of the stuff does tie back in culturally. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now be getting a curriculum update on business.
Nice job. Chance to debrief with you, we'll talk. Oh, we gotta hook the computer up.
Thank you. I'm serious. Oh. I know. I kind of want to see the. Oh well, it's not like their present.
Is there any?
Yeah, let's go.
Alright, bye. See you next month. How does it feel to be a better Falcon than us? Did you ever have a scandal?
What?
Did you ever have a big scandal?
No, what?
To Yale and start like buying like fake ACT scores and stuff.
Yeah.
Now you know how much I do. Sorry. See ya.
Here we go. We're going to introduce ourselves, right? Don't I want to say it yet? You ready? Ready?
Good evening, everyone. I am Robin Terwilliger. I'm the Business Department Liaison.
Hi, I'm Debbie Wigan. I am in the Business Department at Fairfield Bloodbath High School.
Paul Zatomi, I do the computer science classes and resident nerd at Ward High School.
Megan Finn, I teach AP Economics and Accounting at Ward.
Anna Moses, business teacher at Ward.
I would also like to introduce our National Business Honor Society. Can you guys please all stand? We are very proud of them and thank them for coming to show their support. Okay. Business affects the daily lives of all people as they work, spend, save, invest, travel, and play. Business influences jobs, incomes, and opportunities for personal enterprise and development. As we sit here on March 12th, we are one curriculum, 2 schools, 21 courses, and 12 teachers. As Jack Welch once said, either be number 1 or number 2 in your industry or get out. Business is booming in Fairfield, and our department strives to be number 1. Let us show you what is right with the Fairfield Business Department.
What's right with schools? News 8 anchor Scott McDonald takes us to Fairfield Ward High School.
Entrepreneurs in action. Really packing it in, huh? These students at Fairfield Ward High School. You contacted someone else, right? Have launched their very own business. So we came up with a product, our windbreakers. And they handle it all. Finance, sales, production, and marketing. In fact, the marketing team reached out to News 8 to get their product some publicity. A chance to actually build our own company together. Maintaining a positive bank balance. And we have safety posts. To promotions that make their product pop.
We have an Instagram and Facebook. We make commercials that go on through the school so that everyone sees them during homeroom.
Education and business beyond the pages.
I think this is just a really good way to get your foot in the door and really experience what it's going to be like instead of just maybe doing book work. You're really doing it.
And out onto the pavement. Selling door to door was another one of our main strategies here. Tracking those top sellers is the VP of Sales.
This is just a chart of all the students in the class and their total sales.
Some students, like Devin Nepal, have thrived in the sales environment. Yeah.
Devin is right here at number 14. He's pushing 40. He's really close.
Beyond the business side, Nepal takes away some valuable life lessons, like perseverance.
I think that the fact that I kind of stay more positive, I don't let the fact that I'm getting constant no's put me down. I just think that that no is going to be closer to a yes.
And for the whole class, a glimpse into what it takes to run a successful business. We all have an overall goal, and we're working towards it, and it really isn't easy. In Fairfield, Scott McDonald, News 8. Introducing.
Our entrepreneurship course encompasses all the core skills that we teach throughout the business department. The Princeton Review compiled a list of top college majors based on research, covering job prospects, alumni salaries, and popularity. Computer science, communications, business, and economics are listed as the top majors in college and the most sought-after majors for employers looking to hire. The Fairfield Business Department teaches 4 out of 5 of those top majors. With over 20 courses, including 4 AP courses, the Fairfield Business Department curriculum lets students develop a broad knowledge of everyday business operations, as well as gain skills in areas such as computer science, marketing, management, finance, leadership, business strategies, communication, and IT. Using data from the last 5 years, we compared our Fairfield Business AP student scores to the national and state average. Scores range from 1 to 5, with most colleges accepting a 3. As you can see, all of Fairfield's AP averages are higher than the Connecticut state average, and they're also higher than the national average. We feel as our program continues to grow, so will our AP scores. Looking at business enrollment over the past 10 years and excluding the graduation requirement computer information systems, 41% of students took at least 1 additional business course. 26 took 2 or more additional courses. Comparing the years 2009 to 2018, the percentage of those graduates who took 1 or more additional business course beyond what the graduation requirement was increased by 58%. The percent who took 2 or more additional courses doubled during this time frame, and the percent who took 3 or more additional courses tripled during this frame. The percent who took 4 or more additional business courses quadrupled during this time frame. So what does this all mean? All of these numbers and charts basically tells us one important fact. That is, at the end of the day, more students are taking more business classes every year. A major importance of our business education curriculum is to prepare students for life, increasing engagement in the learning process as students gain valuable insight into real-life applications of the skills they're being taught helps our students prepare for life after high school. The Fairfield Business Department prides itself for giving students experiences beyond the classroom. In 2018, the Fairfield Public Schools National Business Honor Society chapter was created. This prestigious organization promotes and recognizes academic achievement, fosters and recognizes leadership skills, character development, helps members grow ethically and socially, and encourages member involvement in service and learning initiatives. The Fairfield Public Schools Future Business Leaders of America chapter helps students develop competent, aggressive business leadership, strengthen the confidence of students in themselves and their work, creates more interest in and understanding in the American business enterprise, and encourages members in the development of individual projects that contribute to the improvement of home, business, and our community. The Fairfield Public Schools has been working with junior achievement well before 2005. Our management, entrepreneurship, and internship and career explorations classes have collaborated with local businesses and community members to give our students those real-world experiences. In March, schools from across the state gathered together to compete with the Junior Achievement High School Titan Business Simulation. The JA Business Challenge, as we call it, places high school students in the CEO seat. Fairfield Ludlow has earned first place in this prestigious and highly competitive competition for the past 5 years. And in 2017, they placed first in the National Titan competition. I want to give a shout out to this year's Junior Achievement team, Deb McGuigan on her first time competing, and Fairfield Ludlow High School's 5th time for the first place win, and to Anna Moses, who brought the Ward team to earn 2nd place. We are definitely the champions of the Junior Achievement competition. And one more shout out, just in today, to Diana Rainho from Fairfield Ludlow High School and the FBLA team, who had 3 students place in the FBLA competition this afternoon. This department is definitely on fire. The business department takes time to collaborate with community leaders, local businesses, and departments within our schools. In advertising, students created advertising campaigns for local businesses. Country Cow, Total Image Hair Salon, Pronto Pizza, Cinch, Fairfield Farmers Market, and Magic Beans Toy Store are a few of our clients. Marketing students have collaborated with art and design students when designing their advertising campaigns. As you saw earlier, entrepreneurship works in conjunction with Junior Achievement to create a student-run business. Students work with the video production class to produce creative and meaningful commercials for their business. As I also mentioned, the management class works with the Junior Achievement and the Junior Achievement Business Challenge. Internship and Career Explorations class provides students with the hands-on work experience within our community and local businesses. In accordance with the state of Connecticut's unpaid experiential learning program, students earn graduation credit by participating in an internship over the course of a semester. This year, we are extremely excited that both Ward and Ludlow business departments have been awarded a partnership with the Amazon Future Engineering Program. This is a comprehensive childhood to career program to inspire, educate, and train children and young adults to pursue careers in computer science. Also this year, students will say ni hao to international business. The Fairfield Ward Business Department has partnered with World Language and will be participating in our first international field trip to China. The students will have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to visit the cities of Beijing, Xi'an, Chengdu, and Shanghai. Students will explore local businesses, be immersed in the culture, and most importantly, get to see and possibly hold the pandas, because everybody loves those pandas. Our business education curriculum prepares students to succeed in the global workplace. In today's rapidly growing and changing economy, it is essential for students to occupy the skills needed to cope with adulthood, not only in their personal life and in the complexities of the outside world, but in the practical necessities of saving and investing, handling consumer and credit issues. The business curriculum embodies the vision, the Fairfield Public Schools vision of a graduate. Here's a glimpse into our 21st century classrooms. Sorry. The Fairfield Business Education curriculum, in accordance with the National Business Education Standards, focus on continuous quality education. Students master the knowledge, applications, and attitudes that will reinforce workplace competencies. Assessment is both a measure of competence and a teaching strategy. What is not mastered at one level becomes the focus of successive learning experiences. We are Fairfield, and we are the Fairfield Business Education Department, inspiring hope, igniting imagination, and instilling the love of learning. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does board members have any questions? Ms. Leeper?
Thank you so much for the presentation. So it's no secret on this board that I think financial literacy is a core life skill and central to student success in life, but our enrollment is not that high. So I've talked with Mr. Cummings at great length about how to market it to our students to boost enrollment, and I've wondered if you've given any thought to how we might be able to achieve that.
Anna Moses here is our financial literacy teacher at Ward, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you. I share your passion. I have a son who graduated from college, and 2 years after he graduated, he paid off his student loans. And he's now working, living in Boston on his own, standing on his own 2 feet, and I'm hoping my daughter will follow in her first footsteps. So all of the kids in that financial literacy class, I have 3 sections right now. They're like my kids, and I want to make sure that they have everything they need in order to leave home and not call home again, except to say happy birthday, happy Mother's Day, happy Father's Day, but not, can you loan me some money? So when I first taught the course 3 years ago, there were 12 students in the class, and now it's 3 very full sections. I do have a passion for financial literacy, and I do believe every student should have those skills. The enrollment is growing. We do market the class, and it's marketed by the students. So, you know, I'm happy with that. I hope it continues to grow. And I tell you truly, I do look at everything that, all the skills that they need, from credit to loans to investing to budgeting and planning. They've gone home and challenged their parents on a couple of things, and I do send home questions, dinner time topics to talk about.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that the enrollment is growing, and urge you to continue to market it so students understand that actually it can be quite exciting and relevant. And then I have a second question, if that's okay. Some pictures made it look like there could be a bit of a gender gap in some areas. Is that accurate? And if so, are there any things you guys are doing to help close that gap?
You know, when I started 19 years ago in Fairfield, my classes were primarily male, 1 female maybe, and we're definitely closing the gap. I feel that more and more females are taking our business courses, so we are growing. Our department went from 3 when I started, and now we're 12, so teachers. So we're working on it.
Specifically, what about the students and also computer science? I would be curious to hear if that is different than economics, for example.
Yes, there is a big gender gap nationally in computer science, and I've tried to address that issue. College Board has also addressed that issue by introducing the new AP Computer Science Principles class that should open up the availability to freshmen taking computer science, and hopefully retaining young female programmers in the future. That is a goal of mine, and it is a goal of the College Board, and I'm sure it's a goal of the department to encourage that as well. I also like to say I'm the only male in the business department at Ward, so I understand the gender gap as well. Every lunch period I understand the gender gap, but yes, it is a growing concern in the computer science field as well.
Thank you. And do you mind speaking to economics? You said you were the AP Econ professor?
Yes, yes. In economics, I think we have a bit more of a balance. It still does lean more male students, but we have seen growth where, you know, we made the joke when I first started teaching, especially we have a sports and entertainment class. Some of my classes were all male. And I would tell the girls in the hallway, I know you play sports. I see you. So why aren't you taking these classes? So even classes like that were historically sometimes 100% male, we're making strides. We're not, you know, to where we want to be yet. But with economics, I think it's a little more balanced. My accounting class is also more balanced, and my sports class, last time I taught it, we had a whopping 7 females. So that's growth from, you know, 0 to 7. So it is a priority of the department, and we are working on it.
That's great. Thank you.
Mrs. Max Cannelli?
First of all, just one plug. Mrs. Moses, if you can please speak to your financial literacy class about the importance of getting a summer job. I have a vested interest in your selling that, because I have a family member who could use that talk. And if he's watching, he's going to kill me. But a couple of questions I had. One thing I didn't hear at all about, which also gets to the point of recruitment, is the middle school piece of this, because we did add I can't actually remember if it was the coding class in middle school. And has that proven to be something that has boosted either the computer enrollment, their computer literacy, or has that proven to have a positive impact, or does that need to be made more robust? Is it unsuccessful? I'm just looking for some kind of feedback on that, because that's something that's new since we approved the curriculum.
I'll speak on that behalf. Several years ago, I taught mixed classes. I taught the standard business class, management, law, so on and so forth. This year is the first year that I teach all computer classes. I have 5 classes that all deal with computer science, and they're all full. They have like 27 students in them each. So I am maxed out. AP Computer Science is running 2 sections, principles 1. Programming is 1 section, and then I teach robotic programming and the general CIS class. But in my computer lab for the 5 periods that I teach every day. So the enrollment has increased tremendously. I remember teaching 2 students in AP Computer Science before and having them sit into one of my programming class, and on Mondays I would lecture to them, and on Fridays I would lecture to the computer science students, and so on and so forth. So it went from 1 section of 2 classes to 5 classes in a relatively short period of time.
Like 2 years.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years.
We're hoping to increase the numbers for next year.
Yeah, as well.
So are you attributing that to the addition in middle school?
Yes.
I mean,
yes, I believe it is. I'm on the technology committee. I understand the middle school's goal as well, so I piggyback along with those lessons as well.
And then could you speak to how that middle school piece has changed? I mean, because obviously, you know, it was rolled out 2 years ago, so now there's been a couple of years to to measure the success of that? Because it's only offered for a single quarter,
Yeah.
or at least it was a couple of years ago. And I was wondering how that is working out. Because obviously that's an investment of staff, and I assume some PD, et cetera. So I'm curious if you could speak to that.
I can't really speak to
Okay.
the middle school model.
Right here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't really speak to the middle school model. I just understand that there is one section, students who get to choose between different activities, the elective, during that period of time. So I know that my freshmen have talked about taking coding class in middle school. Usually the more successful freshmen have an understanding of coding already, opposed to going over the basics in the general computer class. So I think it's successful in the middle school, and I'm hoping it's growing in the middle school. It'll make my job a little bit easier in the high school as well. They're coming with more knowledge of coding principles.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. On switching to graduation requirements, because one way we're looking at building that mastery credit and to appeal to a wide range of students, we had looked at the SAT requirement in English, we'd looked at the in reading and writing, we'd looked at the SAT requirement in math, and then we have that third option of ways that students can demonstrate mastery in other departments, and obviously business, that would seem to, you would definitely have some students who might be able to fulfill graduation requirements in your department. I was wondering if that's something that the department has talked about much and can see ways of really pointing students in that direction. Do you have, in other words, either through competitions, through tests? That's what I don't know is about the business department as well, in terms of beyond the AP test, what else would be ways that they can measure mastery?
We've briefly spoken about it and did some brainstorming, but we have not gone any farther than that. So we have a few ideas. We've thrown them out there. State testing is hard because we're such a big department. When you take like when you go to the FBLA competition, you might be taking a test on stuff that you wouldn't learn in just one class. You might have to have a bunch of classes. So it's a little bit different when you're dealing with like a state competition type thing.
Okay.
Well, we can definitely work on that. That's not a problem. We just haven't yet.
Okay, fair enough. And I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more how the Future Business Leaders is different from the Business Honor Society.
So the Business Honor Society, the students have to have a GPA, a certain GPA in the business department and overall. FBLA, anybody can join. It's a competitive club. They have 2 competitions, one in fall, one in the spring. We do a lot of community service with them. The National Business Honor Society just started this year. We were very grateful that we could pull it off. So we're just getting started with that. We'd like to do more community service, but we wanted the kids to have something else to put on their resume, especially the students that are taking 4 or more business courses before they graduate. They really deserve that recognition.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's, the one other question I had was regarding ethics. I saw that flash up there on one slide, and I was wondering to what degree does ethics factor? I mean, obviously, I don't believe there's a separate course in it. So to what degree is that impacting your curriculum?
I think we talk about ethics every day in every course.
Wonderful.
So especially when something comes up in sports, especially accounting, it's something that we talk about every day and talk about that you want to feel okay going to sleep that night knowing that everybody knows what you've done in business and really having that integrity for themselves. So it's not anything we have a course on. We do have a lot of leadership skills in our management course that we work on, but there is not one course for it.
Would it be possible for a couple of the teachers, whether it's in AP or anything else, to speak about how it is integrated? Because I actually think it's probably a better model that it's integrated into all the courses as opposed to a standalone course.
So, for example, we're actually at the end of March in my accounting class, we're starting an ethics unit, and how we begin that ethics unit is we've already mastered our understanding of income statements and balance sheets at that time. So I use the example of Enron and what happened with Enron and how they misled their investors and cook the books, so to speak. And that's kind of our jumping off point. And we mentioned, from there we go into all different insider trading and the principal agent issues that exist. We talk about that in economics as well. So how are there challenges for different businesses? For example, giving their workers stock options, which was a big part of the Enron story, and how that may change how the workers do their day-to-day versus the managers. They have different working issues. So sports and entertainment is another class that I teach frequently. Ethics, there's a whole theme that we do on ethics, and that is updated yearly. Unfortunately, we're given lots of information and headlines to work with.
Today you got a good one.
Yeah, exactly. So the other really great thing that I could speak on for all of our business classes is we have the freedom to, when something happens like the news story today with the colleges and the celebrities, buying their children's way in, that can be a topic in class tomorrow. And we all are very current with what's going on, and we share that, and we get the students' opinions on it. And it's very easy to make those connections in almost all of our courses.
Okay, so I guess just one more question, then I'm done, is that as part of this update, is there anything which has changed, that based on what you've been seeing, that you've been changing, that we'll hear more about when you come for your next curriculum vote before the board, and with that, the budget impact as well? Are either of those two things that, like a wish list?
We're very lucky because we change every day. Just like Megan said, something in the news comes up. So our courses are changing every day, year to year, semester to semester, really keeping up with the trends and what's going on. As a budget impact, it's pretty much on the internet and everything. We don't really require a lot of course materials because everything is out there. So there isn't much of an impact on the budget.
So I assume the Chromebooks have been helpful for that too.
They have. We're very lucky to have 3 computer labs and 1 at Ludlow that really help out, especially with the computer science classes too.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Jacobson?
Not so much as a question, as a follow-up as to Jen Max and Kennelly's questions was, I happen to have 3 girls that are sort of helping with the gender gap at Ludlow that are all taking multiple classes in business. So, and just speaking to Jen's point, one, I remember in business law there was a very large project on social corporate responsibility that they had to do, investigating, picking a company, looking at their policies, looking at their marketing, looking at things that may have happened in their background or not, or just any type of philanthropic or just what they're doing. So that is kind of incorporated, at least I know, into that class, as well as the introduction to business class, speaking to the financial literacy, also the intro to business financial literacy components, because I know they're going on a field trip where they have to pick a job and they have to budget based on that salary for housing and their credit. And so I think some of these things are incorporated throughout all of these separate subjects, even though it might not be. Although I do think the concept of a corporate social responsibility course is incredibly exciting. But I just want to make a couple of those comments and how those are kind of playing out and what I know just from my own. So thank you very much.
Mr. Asa?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to take a moment to congratulate the students on that project, that apparel company that you started. Very impressive, and I'm very excited to see innovative projects like that. As a lifelong entrepreneur and business owner myself, I wish I had some of the access to what you're doing today when I was in high school. So kudos to you and thank you for your hard work. And to the students in the audience, very nicely done, and I urge you to continue with your entrepreneurship. If this is something that sparks something inside of you, it's all about taking risks and, following your gut when you get older. And when you go to college, continue on these business classes. Take as much as you can, get everything you can in. But at the end of the day, follow through with this. So if this is something that inspires you, 5-10 years from now, you could be a business owner. So good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I kind of want to take a moment of personal privilege to find out how I can get one of those Fairfield sweatshirts. I hear they're sold out. If they are back in stock, please come before this board again, because I think you might have some customers. I also have an idea for you that I've been thinking about. As you know, Connecticut is really going to ban plastic bags. It seems like that is a focus. I think it would be wonderful if we could get the art department and the business department to maybe design some reusable bags with student artwork, maybe sell it. Something to think about, all you guys back there. And I'd also like to thank staff and members of this board who advocated for the block schedule, because I really, my oldest daughter did not have the block schedule. I had to twist her arm to take a business class in high school. She didn't have time, she didn't want to. There were tears, how am I going to fit everything in? She took it, loved it, went undergraduate business school, graduating this year, already has a job. So thank you. Thank you to those board members that really pushed for the block schedule, Mr. Hatzis who pushed for the block schedule, because I have to think that that helped increase enrollment and just access to many students. And I'm really looking forward to what comes next for you guys. It's very exciting, and thank you for the presentation. This board has been, over the last few meetings, really just entrenched in talking about buildings and facilities and budgets, and it's very nice to bring our focus back where it belongs, to student learning and teaching. So good job, and congratulations to the students as well.
Well, I wanted to thank you for hosting us, and the Honor Society actually has some goodie bags and some things for you to take home with you as a parting gift. So you can use your reusable bag for your groceries.
Thank you.
There's one in here. CV, there's one in here.
No, they won't.
And here I was thinking I was being so creative. See, I didn't take business classes when I was in high school.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
No, but if you gotta get a shirt.
You can excuse them now, I think.
Okay. I know. I thought I had a great new idea, but no, not that innovative. Mr. Rivera?
Yeah, I would just like to add, as someone who's been part of the business department and taken multiple classes, not part of it, but taken multiple business classes, it's an excellent department. The experience was great, and I have to owe it to the business department, because I recently got into the business school at the college I wanted to go to most, and I think I'd have to owe it to the business department. And a wonderful letter from Mrs. Terwilliger.
Can we ask what school you're going to?
UConn.
Yay! Congratulations. Very good. Any final comments, questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we're moving on to adoption of policy 5141.21, students administration of medication in the schools. Recommend a motion that the Board of Education adopt policy 5141.21, students administration medication in schools. Excuse me for that. Ms. Maxinelli, seconded by Mr. Peterson. Ms. Maxinelli?
Just want to draw your attention, because obviously it's been a few months since you've seen this policy. You'll note that we did make a few additional changes after conversation with some members of the public. Our original version, I think, it absolutely did the job that we wanted to do. This provided a little bit higher degree of clarity to what was intended by some of the wording. So you'll notice that just to make sure that you saw exactly what had been changed as a result of those additional policy conversations after we presented this to you for the first read, and those are those changes in red. I didn't receive any questions from board members, but obviously if you have any, I hope I can answer them, and if I can't, and as a result, we need to postpone the vote, I understand, because obviously there has been some language change, there have been some language changes, but that is the reason, and thus those changes are captured in red.
Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none, this is a voting item. Any members of the public would like to speak to this? Mr. Asa?
Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, just to confirm on to page 3, or the third page, where it says while attending school in order to, just to confirm, that carries on to under this title here, right?
Correct.
Because it says.
Yeah, that's a formatting issue that will need to be fixed.
Sorry I didn't catch that
That's
when
all
I
right,
first
neither
saw
did
it. But I think that line just needs to be moved above the bold.
Yeah.
I think that it can be approved, right? And that modification.
I believe so, yes.
Anything else? Okay, that the Board of Education adopt policy 514121, students administration of medication in schools. All in favor? Ms. Picco, Ms. Leeper, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Vitale, Mr. Asa, Ms. Jacobson, Mrs. Maxwell Kennelly, Mr. Peterson. Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. Okay, moving on to review of redistricting guiding principles and facilities planning principles. Put this on the agenda really just as a to put us on the same page in terms of some of the past work that's been done as we begin and continue our discussions on facilities. These redistricting guiding principles came out of the Board of Education's redistricting subcommittee. They met for a number of months back in 2015, had a number of community meetings, and these principles were developed with community input. I just want to go through them. They were approved by the Board of Education on November 17th, 2015. These principles were also given to Malone and McBroom to help with coming up with some redistricting plans that were included in our racial imbalance plan. So the plans that are included in the racial imbalance plan take these principles into consideration. Some other plans that we've received since then from Malone and McBroom, some of the closing of school options, some of the pocket redistricting, the K through 2, 3 through 5, those scenarios were not put forth following these principles. As we go through, I'm going to read through them, and I'd be interested, I think they're all, I'm guessing that everyone's going to still think they're important and have value. I would be curious to know if any have some flexibility in terms of, well, maybe move it down on the list, or we should revisit that being a principle. We're not going to take any actions on changing them right now, but I think we just need to talk about them. So the first one is established neighborhoods should be maintained. Natural and man-made boundaries, rivers, highways shall be reviewed when determining attendance lines. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly?
I would completely strike that. And I say that that there's an aspect of common sense, and I'm not sure where it would apply, but especially where it involves busing, I don't see any reason that this has to be something that a company, a consultant is being bound by. I apologize. And more to the point, we're crossing this all the time anyway. We can't say major roads aren't to be crossed when we're creating our elementary school districts in particular. It's broken all the time. Black Rock Turnpike is not a hard and fast Post Road is most definitely not. So if we already know that there are several instances out there where we're not doing it, I don't see why we should be maintaining it.
Mr. Dwyer and then Ms.
I would agree with that. I think there are natural ways to do this, but every time you give a task to a agency to say, okay, how could you do this? My recollection of these this effort from Malone and McBroom last time around, they felt much less flexibility in trying to approach the issue because of the guiding principles, if you will, that virtually we can't do it and comply with everyone. And on number one, I think you'd be hard-pressed to say that the butterfly district for Jennings, that my house at Burr and Congress is combined with the natural neighborhood that's down near McKinley. But the Jennings thing goes kind of that far. You know, my house happens to be within walking distance of Burr if there were sidewalks, but I'm districted to Jennings. And there is a practicality that if at some day we have to create boundaries that fit the demographics of different streets that require flexibility. So, so I would agree with Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly.
Ms. Pickup?
Number one's actually the only one I would even consider getting rid of. Exactly the same reason I remember when McBroom came and said that number one would be the one that would have to be taken off of here in order to redistrict, comprehensive redistricting plan. I remember in 2015 when the redistricting committee went over these again, and the board at that time, I can't remember if I was on it at that date, November 17th, agreed that at that time we didn't have the major issues that we needed to, that we were going to disrupt the neighborhood environment. But now, 4 years later, things have changed. So the only way to do a comprehensive redistricting is to get rid of number one.
Mr. Peterson, followed by Mr. Asa.
I just want to piggyback on all those comments because I do think that number one has basically two issues in it that we need to think about. One, I do believe in neighborhood schools. I would like to have walkers where possible, but in terms of the man-made up boundaries, the roads and rivers and such, that's a busing issue. I certainly don't want to have walkers have to cross the post road. I was out on Kings Highway, happened to be at 8:30 this morning, saw a lot of kids queuing up for the bus. I don't want them to have to cross, but those are not walker situations, those are busser situations. And so that's, I think we need to separate out this idea of natural boundaries versus if there are kids on a bus, that's less of a concern.
Mr. Asa?
I concur with the previous comments in that I think if we were to get to a point of redistricting, and whether it be a comprehensive redistricting, the new lines will create new neighborhoods, and that will be your school neighborhood. It may not be, it's going to be everybody in that district or in that school zone. And I think it's hard for us to kind of think about doing that, but I think we need to, I do think we're tying the hands of the consultants, so I agree. And when they're drawing the lines, give them the ability to bring us proposals. And as Mr. Dwyer said, I mean, especially in that scenario, some of the lines and everything just, they don't match up with this. So as Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly said, I don't think we're really doing it now, so I agree.
I make one other comment.
Mr. Dwyer?
The other one that I think the board ought to look at is number 8.
Okay, can we just wait? I'm going to go through each one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll
wait.
Anything else on number 1?
Just in general, these guiding principles are actually older than 2015. We just reiterated in 2015 that we agreed with them. These came from a previous board, which I don't remember, Jessica, if you were on or not.
It's actually the other. The other document that's referenced on the agenda, the facilities planning principles, that was from 2010. It was before anyone here was on the Board of Education.
But these were done at the same time, weren't they?
No.
No.
No, these came in 2015.
They were adopted in 2015, but the committee that was looking at them used virtually the same principles. We reworded them a little bit that were in an original document.
Which we have here in our folder, the Fairfield Board of Education Facilities Planning Principles.
There is some overlap, but this did come out of that committee, which was formed at the time, in respect, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Dwyer, being that you were the chair, to look at, do we need to expand Holland Hill? Or can a redistricting solve the space issues? And the committee did some work, and it was determined that, based on these principles and just the space in the district, that it could not happen. It was not, it got passed on to Malone Room for the Racial Imbalance, but it really was more of a facilities utilization issue when it came forward.
And it's behind tab 2 in their book.
Not without some debate. There was some voice on the old board that would have preferred to, quote, not eliminate all of them, but they felt that too many of these made for less flexibility. And while I don't speak for them because I didn't agree with them, there was a voice raised on that issue.
So moving down, number 2, consider the impact on busing and walkers. Students currently allowed to walk to school should be able to maintain that status. Long bus rides are to be avoided. Mr. Peterson?
I don't want to say that we should strike this, but because I think long bus rides are to be avoided where possible. If there are scenarios where students who are currently walkers are put on a bus, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that should be something that should warp our plans unduly.
Mrs. Maxon Cannelli?
Given the rides that we're already having them go on with, for example, Stratfield to McKinley going across to Tomlinson, okay, maybe longer than that. I think that really applies especially more to the elementary school. But initially I had been very much in support of A. That just seemed to make sense. But given the tremendous amount of anecdotal evidence, and we don't have numbers, of parents who are walkers who are driving their children, well, then you can drive. I mean, I'm not looking to do it, but the point is we've now heard from a couple of school communities where the buses aren't being used. Therefore, A, should not be tying our hands. Or if it were even on I don't want to say school-by-school basis, because then we'd get accused of being unfair, and I'm sensitive to that. But the point is, right now, certain school communities don't avail themselves of buses, therefore we don't need to be sensitive to this point, or less sensitive to this point, and it certainly shouldn't necessarily be something which strikes an otherwise viable plan.
Mrs. Gerber?
Well, I think one thing that we need to be sensitive to, though, in terms of busing walkers, is that we may be looking at adding buses and adding costs. That's always been my concern, is that, if we are very sensitive to, the cost of transportation, and we're always hearing when we have our town halls, someone will inevitably show up and say there's so much money in transportation, and they talk about empty buses. And so I would just be concerned, and we have other town bodies who have told us we need to expand our walker radii for schools. So I would just, and I could also say, as a 10-year walker to an elementary school, that is something that, I would be sensitive to, because I remember back in 2002 when the redistricting plan was going, there were some discussions about busing walkers who could see Osborne Hill School from their home. And so I think having some mention of that in there for that reason, and for trying to avoid additional costs. And I know this is a separate topic, but perhaps one thing we can or should do would be to try to advocate for more people opting out of buses, who can take the bus. And so then that may kind of change things a little bit. And I know that it doesn't have to do with these redistricting guidelines, but they are kind of tied together, so.
I thought you had your hand up.
I
next.
did. I mean, pretty simple. I wouldn't want to put walkers on a bus.
Ms. Picco?
I'd actually like more of a description or definitive wording for B. What do you consider a long bus ride?
Mr. Dwyer?
I would imagine in scheduling the buses with students, I think the board should be somewhat careful about picking a number that says, okay, a 32-minute bus ride is too long, and when a bus can pick up a kid and it becomes 33 minutes, does that open the board up for a challenge to our transportation guidelines because of that extra minute, when perhaps that extra minute, putting that extra kid on the bus, saved another bus? So I'd be cautious about picking a definitive number, that's all. I agree with you that it would be nice to have an understanding from our transportation department what they currently use as that kind of basic standard. But putting it in writing, I think, might be a problem.
Ms. Jacobson?
I was just going to say, I mean, it's up to the board's discretions per state statute for us to come up with that number ourselves, except if you're a special education student, which is no longer than 60 minutes. That gives you a statutory reference. I think an hour is a long time. But for general ed, for non-special education students, that's, is really up to, it can be as short or as long as the board decides, at least at this time.
Mr. Asa?
So I'm sensitive to Mrs. Gerber's comment. However, I don't think that we should, again, tie our hands with the consultant. I think that that should be part of it, and that would be something that we would consider moving forward as far as transportation costs, etc. But we also could find out that it doesn't cost us more. So I just don't want us to hold back from doing this because of that until we know, where we're going and what those numbers could be. And I agree with the long bus rides. I don't think any of us want kids on buses for a long time, but Mr. Dwyer makes a good point. So again, the one thing I have here is where it says students currently allowed to walk to school should be able to maintain that status. Can someone just reference, does that mean where a school like Mill Hill that is 100% bus school, is that saying that those kids are not allowed to walk? Like, where did that come from? And I apologize if I'm naive here.
I just know that it's been the practice for Dwight, Burr, and Mill Hill to be total busing, and it just has to do with safety. And at some point, obviously, the police probably weighed in on that. I asked Mr. Fickey the other day if it was actually in a planning document somewhere, where did it come from, and it's just his institutional knowledge of how it's been implemented for years.
Okay.
And I think if you look actually at the traffic study that came today, you'll see there are an awful lot of children actually coming in cars.
Yeah.
Not utilizing the buses. But if I could just mention one thing, Lime, we are not running a lot of empty buses, which over the last couple of years we have worked on that. We are doing bus counts after the year has started, how many kids are on the buses. We try to have routes at about 30 minutes would be great, but we are going to have some routes that are 40 and 45, especially in the upper grades. You're going a longer distance, when you're talking about high school especially.
So just to follow up, finish my question then, I guess when we're talking about what we're discussing here, I just think maybe a slight modification to A, if not getting rid of it.
Ms. Picco?
Just piggybacking off of what Mrs. Jacobson said, we're at the moment talking about elementary schools, and so fundamentally there is a problem with me in saying that an elementary school kid can be on a bus for an hour. I think that's an awfully long time for a kid every morning and every afternoon to be sitting on a bus, which is one of the most unstructured times of their day.
Ms. Jacobson?
Don't we have walking and busing guidelines that are shorter than the statutory requirement?
When Mr. Vicky actually, when they're planning the routes, they try to stay around 30 minutes. We can go up to 40 or 45.
I meant the distance, not the time.
Where are you?
Like the elementary.
How many
if
miles
you-
from a school, that kind
Right,
of thing?
it's in it
Oh,
like
for
a
the
half-
walker?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it's
Ours are
less
shorter,
than,
right?
Yes, it is less than it is at the state. I want to say, Ms. Menzel or Mr. Collin, you may know off the top of your head, elementary, I believe, is a mile. Is it a mile? And middle high is like 1.5. It's a mile.
Half a mile.
Half
Yeah,
a mile.
elementary's
Half a
small,
mile,
yeah.
1.5, I think. But it's
mean-
less than, we could, yes, we could expand that and add more walkers.
Mr. Peterson.
Just to throw out for the sake of comment, one of my hopes would be that a more rational distribution of school districts might shorten the average bus ride.
Point well taken. Jen Lieber.
I just have one question for clarification on point 2, because we potentially have several families that could be walkers to multiple schools. So if you could be, just as an example, a walker, you're currently a walker to Holland Hill, but you also are within the walking distance to McKinley, as an example, are we saying that means under this principle, we wouldn't want to move you because you are currently a walker, even if you would still remain a walker in the new lines? Or are we saying that's okay and that still meets this guideline? I guess it's sort of hypothetical. I'm just throwing it out there because we have several elementary schools quite close together. And how we define a neighborhood, it might just be more based on precedent than proximity.
Yeah, it's all how you read it. I didn't read it that says if you walk to Holland Hill, you have to still walk to Holland Hill. I read it that if you walk to school and you can walk to another school, that's okay. We've met the guideline. It's depending on how you read it, what you think the emphasis was.
All right, so I think this needs a little bit more research, I think, or a little more discussion just in terms of, how long on a bus, how the whole maintaining walkers to their current elementary schools. I'm hesitant to move children that can walk to their schools and have them become busers. That said, I have also heard that a lot of children that should be walking to school are not walking to school. They are being driven to school, which makes me a little bit, not as firm on this as I was 2 months ago, quite honestly. So I'm a little bit more open-minded about revisiting this, and I hope that those that are watching, that are walkers, that are currently driving, when the weather starts warming up, we see more kids on sidewalks. Because that really, I think, is an ideal for many reasons. The cost of, we don't want to bust them, we don't want cars just clogging up our streets, and it's just better for kids to be outside. So number 3, safety issues shall be considered. Traffic patterns, walking patterns. Mrs. Maxim Pinelli.
I actually don't recall exactly what this means. In terms of how did it impact any formulation of plans A through, what did it go up to? A through F, 1 and 2? I don't understand how this one impacts it, and until I know how it impacts it, I'm just guessing what this means.
Going back to Mrs. Leeper's point in terms of walking patterns, per her point, it could be safe to walk to Holland Hill, various sidewalks, whereas walking to a different school would be crossing a major highway, crossing a road. So that's the type of pattern that this spoke to at the time, was the safety in the route. I remember particularly for the walker piece, but it was also also the busing. But for me, it was more the walking piece. You could walk to one place safer than you could to another place.
Right. Mr. Asa.
Well, I think this comes into the transportation component too, whereas there are situations in the town where somebody may fall within the walking area, but it's not deemed not safe.
Yeah, not safe.
So in that situation, they would be offered transportation. So I think it's important, obviously, that, and I don't think that would ever go away. I don't think we would ever put a student knowingly at risk. So I'm kind of with you on this. I think it's kind of like inherently built in with what we do. And if someone is not a walker and becomes a walker, but it's not safe, so I'm kind of with you. I'd like a little bit more insight onto that.
And specifically, insight to how does this impact a consultant's plan? And so we would need to be, no walking pattern will be required that is a safety issue. This to me is not clear, and we need to know exactly what it is that we're restricting somebody's, hands on in terms of looking at any possible plans. So.
Mrs. Gerber.
Well, just one thing I think that we need to keep in mind in all of these is that, yes, these are guiding principles, but, things shall be considered, should be maintained. It's not saying must be, has to be. I mean, there are things that are certainly something for any consultant and this board to consider, but I don't consider this to be absolutely written in stone that there are no exceptions, because as we've said, there are already some things in our schools right now which don't apply to these principles. So while it's a good kind of stepping off point, I don't think that we need to look at this as the gospel per se, and I just, that's just my concern. I mean, I understand, I totally agree that we need to look at all of these, and if people feel strongly about getting rid of or altering some of them, but I just don't want us to get kind of too stuck in the weeds on this, I guess is what I'm saying.
Good point. And as I said, I brought this up just to get us all on the same starting page as we're having these discussions. I'm not looking to rewrite them right now, but just this is where the district was the last time the board and the community talked about redistricting. And maybe let's just see where we're moving from the starting point.
Right, but to that point, these were not the principles that determined our current elementary school lines. And therefore, we have been told, now I don't think we pushed Malone and McBroom to tell us, how did we tie your hands by having these? I mean, Mrs. Pitko referenced earlier how they I don't recall that, but I'll trust Mrs. Pitko's memory that she remembers them saying that for number one, that really impacted the number and range of plans that they could come to us with. So, and that was actually one of the questions I had written down, and I don't know if Mr. Cullen can speak to it because I believe he was at those meetings, but I'm not sure which one of these did tie their hands the most. Because, if number 3 was we took that as a reminder, but it wasn't a restrictive issue, well, then we don't need to take time on it. But if someone who was there as part of it and knows from Malone and McBroom that number 5 was absolutely a contributor to your only receiving this number of plans that were viable, then that's something we need to determine, is this important to us enough to restrict somebody's hands? And that's what I don't recall getting that specifics.
Follow up, Mrs. Gerber.
I'm sorry, just looking at scenario E, which is page 25, under section 3 in the black binders that we have, they're talking about conceptual boundaries, and they're talking about students moving from Holland Hill to Sherman and Sherman to Riverfield. Well, they're crossing major roads, right? And that didn't stop them from giving us this plan. So.
And yet we were told that this restricted them, and so that's what there's a gap in our information.
Yes, exactly. Which again comes back to my whole idea of, while these are certainly something for us to aspire to, obviously it didn't tie Malone and McBroom's hands, because scenario E was one of the scenarios that they said was a viable option. So just putting that out there, that right. I just think guiding principles, something for us to aspire to, if when possible, to discuss. But again, Malone and McBroom didn't pay attention to those. That didn't restrict them. They have people crossing boundaries all over the place in this plan. So just putting that out there.
Then I would say, why do we need it? That's what I would come down to. Good reminder that they did in fact do that. Then I would say, then we don't need it.
Dr. Jones?
Yeah, I was just going to say on number 3, I've never seen a redistricting where they wouldn't consider safety issues, traffic patterns, walking patterns. You would never redistrict to just be unsafe. So,
okay. Mr. Peterson.
What I've been thinking about as we go through this back and forth, I have a fundamental question, and maybe this is something that Dr. Jones can talk about, or anyone who's been on the board for a prior iteration of this process. we're not just going to dump this list on them and say do. I imagine there's going to be some sort of consultative back and forth with the consultant about, because the questions that Mrs. Maxinelli wants to ask, which of these is going to bind your hands more, I think is going to be a valuable thing in formulating a final edition of these principles, and for them to basically come to us and say, which of these are you more flexible with? Let's have a conversation about it. I guess that's the thing I don't understand logistically about the process, is what are we going to give them, and how is there going to be a give and take in their understanding of how we want them to work?
I don't think that we are at that point right now in deciding what exactly we're going to give them. I want to work through this in terms of what we have and what we need to maybe reevaluate and come up with, if we want to even give them any principles, what would those principles look like? So before we can have the discussion of what should new principles be, I figured looking at the old principles might be a good place to start, considering that's the mindset
Christine.
of a number of people on this board. Ms. Picco.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I'm trying to remember how it happened 4 years ago to answer you. I believe what happened was the redistricting committee reiterated these, or continually adopted them, gave them to McMullen and McBroom, and they came up with scenarios. And then they said with E, you couldn't do all of your principles if you went with scenario E. It was 4 years ago, so if Jen, Jess, or Phil remembers differently, please.
Mr.
Back on number 3, there's something in the back of my mind. We are required to transport children to school. And there's something in the back of my mind that says the legislation that directs that we must do it in a safe manner. And so whether we put 3 in here or not, I think any consulting firm worth their weight would be consulting. We have to do this in a legal, complying with state regulations. Somebody might want to look at what that state law is to see if that gives a better definition of what is meant by safety issues. So I think Dr. Jones is correct. It doesn't hurt to state it, but it's a natural thing for any professional consultant to consider anyways.
I'm going to move on. Phase 4, phase out all temporary solutions, portables. Mr. Asa.
100%. I don't think there's any ifs, ands, or buts about that. We shouldn't have any more portables or trailers in this district when we're done with our long-range facilities plans, and I think we should stick to that.
Mrs. Maxinelli.
I would suggest an alteration of, because we know we have them. So for me, a redistricting principle would be no plan should increase the use of a portable, would be my suggestion with this.
Any other comments on number 4? Number 5, headroom capacities, 90% shall be targeted. Consider deficiencies of existing facilities. How important is that 90% targeting?
Only comment this. In kind of reading on this, 90% is a number that a lot of people use across the country as a best practice planning principle. And again, I think some former board members would have preferred us to look at 95% as the target, because 10% of a 504 class building is 50 empty seats. And suddenly you get to 85 and you've got 75 empty seats, and suddenly you have a board member saying, we got all these empty seats, just take a kid from McKinley and put him over at Riverfield, fill that empty seat. So we certainly shouldn't go below 90, and in the debate, I think, was whether we should shave on the other side.
Mr. Asa?
Going on what Mr. Dwyer said, I think 90% is a decent number to strive for, because while there are people that will say there's 50 empty seats, we know how the building's being used. So we may need that room. for both future growth, but also special programming and other things. So I'm hesitant to change that number without more information to back it up.
And Mrs. Gerber made an excellent point about 2 or 3 years ago, that a lot of the conversation is around the number of seats. 24 classrooms, 50 seats. That means in every classroom, there's only 2 empty seats. We need the 24 classrooms. It's not like there's one classroom that suddenly is totally empty. And so we frequently we ought to be talking about, as in terms of advocating for this, the number of classrooms we need, not necessarily the quote 504 number.
Mrs. Maximilli.
Number 5 is the one definite, I think, that does need to be handed over to, again, if we move forward with this, to a consultant. That is a hard and fast directive, and that gets to our facility utilization, which is one of the driving forces if we do go forward with this comprehensive redistricting. However, A is what I would want us personally to talk about, is that is there a situation where the deficiencies of a yet-to-be renovated school would argue that they shouldn't be to the 90%, and I don't know that that's ever been something that has factored in or how it could. So I put that out there as something I don't know the answer to, but if no one knows the answer to it, it shouldn't be here.
I don't know the answer to it either. I'm thinking about it.
If I can add, it really goes to the discussion that we've got on here coming up from Mill Hill. That's exactly what I'm trying to advocate when we talk about Mill Hill, because the deficiencies there take those full classrooms out of the rotation. If you always talk about just the seats and you don't consider programming and how the building's used and those deficiencies, then you're really not getting the true number of what fits in that building.
Were you talking about program deficiencies or other type of deficiencies?
No, I'm looking at this as being something we want to be crystal clear to the public and crystal clear to a consultant. How do we want that factoring in? And in this case, I think it would have to be with the advice of, Mr. Cullen and Dr. Jones, and for which schools. Which schools should not be filled to X capacity number because of deficiencies. Yes. I think we need to be that specific. Not right now, but eventually.
And we do have that information in past reports of what's missing in each school in terms of when you look at the ed spec. And just want to be clear to the public that we are going through this again as a starting point, that in terms of handing a document over to a consultant, we would be having community input on this to hear from the community as well, that it isn't necessarily just being decided right now. That was not my intent of putting on the agenda. Number of us were not on the board when you had these discussions, and just to refresh everybody's memory. All right, so number 6, maintain district guidelines for class size.
Yes.
Thoughts? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's or lower. Siblings should attend same schools, avoid crossing feeder plans, grandfather 5th graders. Mrs. Gerber?
Maybe I'm just tired, or maybe I've been reading this too many times, but I think these actually contradict one another. Because siblings should attend the same schools, and grandfather 5th graders are 2 different things. And I'm a little embarrassed that I actually voted for this because it doesn't make any sense. So obviously something, I mean, the thing is, I believe that perhaps one of the reasons why it was done this way is that because these are different issues, and I think you wanted to have all those issues out there for everyone to understand the ramifications. However, here it makes it sound as if they're working in concert when they are actually opposing. So.
Yeah, you don't want to.
So I don't know if would it be, topics, I understand that crossing the feeder pan, but perhaps topics to consider, would the board want to, is it more important to have siblings attend the same schools, or is it more important to grandfather? And not for nothing, but if we are talking about a top to bottom redistricting, we are also looking at grandfathering 5th graders, 8th graders, and 12th graders. if we are in fact going to go in that direction. So that is something else. I mean, at the time, we were just talking about elementary school back in 2015. But if we are going to go
Top to bottom.
whole hog, then we're going to have to look at, grandfathering on 3 levels. So.
Mr. Peterson.
Well, and to that point, I don't think that we should not consider changing feeder patterns. I think we should be very, very upfront that that's something that we are considering doing, and I am very sensitive to those shifts, and I believe that we should obviously involve the public, which is going to be a very deeply felt topic, but I don't think that we should shy away from having that discussion. In terms of grandfathering, I do think that if we can soften the blow in any way, that's fine, but we shouldn't also be bound if that presents logistical challenges that will, be expensive or just very complex.
Ms. Leeper?
To Ms. Gerber's point about the siblings should attend the same schools, if we're not, and I'm not saying I'm advocating for not grandfathering 5th graders, but in what other scenario would the siblings not be attending the same school in a redistricting? But that's the only scenario, right?
As far as I know.
Okay, so I guess I'm sort of confused why it's even here.
Well, that's what I said.
Yes, so, and then I guess, and I don't want, again, to sound like I'm advocating for this, but I've heard from many, many people that the way Fairfield in the past has redistricted is like the most expensive possible way because of the grandfathering. And I would just be curious to see what those numbers were, if that's even possible. And maybe I was misinformed and it is not the most expensive, to grandfather.
Well, when the last time that happened was with the middle school redistricting back in 2011. And the board at the time chose to redistrict 7th and 8th graders in middle school, which resulted 2 sets of buses going down the same streets for 2 years. And it was, I want to say over... I thought actually, because the first year there were 2, there were more. So I think the total was over $1 million over the course of 2 years. I think the second year was about $500,000. I think the first year might have been $750,000. There's a 7 somewhere. So $1.2 million for 2 years. And that was just on middle school. So again, if we're talking about elementary and high school as well, the last time something like that happened was back in 2002 when Burr and Ludlow were opened/reopened. And I don't know what costs there were at that time. And that was slightly different because the high school started with freshmen and sophomores only and then moved up, so it was phased in. But I don't know how it was done at the middle school level, and I don't know how. I think elementary, actually, they just pulled the Band-Aid off and said, you're in 5th grade, going to 5th grade, you're going to your new school for 5th grade. And I don't know how they worked it with middle school. So, and I know the board in 2011 had a very lengthy discussion about the pros and cons of grandfathering, and there was a lot of thought about the fact that middle school students, are at a kind of vulnerable stage in their lives, and to do it in that way was really problematic. And I will say that there were a huge number of parents who came out in support of grandfathering for that reason. So,
thank you. Mrs. Maxinelli.
But finally, to the point of this, I don't think it should be part of redistricting principles. I think it's a conversation we absolutely will need to have and we'll need to make a commitment to. We'll hear from the public about this, but I don't think trying to figure out how is a school going to maintain a population that's coming from 2 different places and one's being phased out and in, that's not something I'm interested in tying the hands of a consultant.
Can I ask one more question? Mm-hmm. This question's not, sorry. It's okay. This question's actually not directly related to number 7, but it is related to something Ms. Max and Connelly said earlier, which was that these were created in 2010. Were these principles created for redistricting that never happened? Or were these created for the middle school redistricting? These redistricting principles.
These were created in 2015.
And so
the redistricting took place in 2011.
So these were created for redistricting that never happened. So, is that right?
Yes.
No, that's correct.
Yes.
But
If you look again in the book, the Fairfield Board of Education Facilities Planning Principles, they were adopted June 22nd, 2010. That was after the Fairfield Woods project had been approved, and they knew, and the board knew at that time that they were going to have to redistrict on the middle school level. So they came up with these. That also had to do with, at the time, there were a large number of portables in the district on the elementary level. So it wasn't just dealing with middle school, although that was that summer then resulted in, you know, discussions taking place that resulted in the vote that took place in September, that resulted in the redistricting that took place in 2011.
So I think that's the point I was trying to make, not too well, is that these concepts were in that 2010 document.
Okay.
And that did give some guidance to how they approached the middle school redistricting.
Okay.
But there are some concepts in here that weren't in there.
Yep.
And then this was created, which essentially guided the development of these plans, but these plans were never implemented.
Okay. At the risk of sounding somewhat cynical, is it possible that these were created primarily to maintain the status quo as much as possible? Because I feel like...
What's that phrase? Don't ask, don't tell?
Okay.
Can I just sort of answer her? She was right in her original question, is that the 2015 version that I have somewhere, I wasn't on the board exactly when the topic came up. I came on in November when it was voted on. There were people on the board at the time who wanted to explore the idea of redistricting, so they asked the board to form another redistricting committee, who then looked at the redistricting principles that were in the facilities. McLone and McBroom came and gave their scenarios, and the board at the time in 2015, or maybe it's 2016 by then, decided not to redistrict.
Yeah, but I guess my point is that if these were created to maintain the status quo, but we're talking about doing something wholly different than has been done before,
Yes. So
other
number
than
8, create the least.
terrifying the community, which is absolutely not my intention in any way, and I think this has to be very thoughtful, these are sort of tying our hands to exactly what we have now. And just another anecdote, really, but I think if you talk to people who live in the Butterfly District and could be walkers to Burr, they would say what we have now makes no sense, and possibly we're very much not a part of this effort to maintain the status quo. So I'm just throwing that out there, which might not be helpful in any way.
Okay, and number 8, create the least amount of disruption, which, Mr. Peterson.
I think that absolutely has to go. I've been advocating from the beginning for a top-down, comprehensive, let's imagine we all landed from space in an empty town, what would we do with our lines? And I think that that's the point that we're at now. I'm hearing that. I believe that for a long time. I've also been hearing that from members of the public. I think that there's a sense in the community that the time for this has arrived. So it's, as frightening as that is, and I am very sensitive to it, this is something that I lived through as an elementary student in Fairfield. I think its time has come.
Lots of hands up over there.
We're going to go down the line, starting with Ms. Pitko.
I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Peterson said, and even what Mrs. Leeper said. In the past 9 years, our town has changed. Where people live has changed in this town. Enrollment projections have changed in this town. So it only makes sense that changes in our facilities are going to happen.
Ms. Leeper?
My impression is that if we actually believed in this principle, we would have pocket redistricted a long time ago and been done with this discussion. But that the least amount of disruption has not really been the goal. It's been about equity of disruption. And so for that reason, I don't actually think this applies.
Mr. Dwyer?
When I wanted to jump ahead to 8, I would have said the same thing Mr. Peterson did. But from another perspective as well, These will get adopted. We'll put some plan together, and some group of parents will come to us and said, you're violating these guidelines. I don't care how many, but we told you these are only guidelines, and all that kind of stuff. They'll still come and make that statement. And any redistricting is going to be disruptive to some group of parents, some group of students. So when you say the least amount of disruption, yeah, it wasn't very disruptive for 90% of our student body, but for 10%, it was very disruptive. So there's a variety of reasons I think that number 8 has to come off.
Okay. Mrs. Maxinelli?
Just very briefly, agree about number 8, but I do want to return briefly to Mrs. Leeper's point and say these did end up enforcing, for the most part, the status quo. We did not adopt any of those. I don't, however, want to exactly disrespect the integrity of the process. The 3 people who worked on that committee, it certainly, there was many members of the public there. I think many of these things are very well intentioned, and there was not the impetus, which we're kind of feeling as a groundswell of readiness for something. So I think at the time that they were done, I think there was an integrity to this. So I don't want to say that it was simply to undermine or anything like that, but I just feel the need to say that on behalf of those committee members and on the board that supported these principles at the time.
Can I just respond to that?
Well, and also, I want to add to it that at the time, it was also in the midst of whether or not to renovate Holland Hill and how big. Or do you just bus children?
I appreciate your comment, and I realize my comments might have sounded extremely callous, and for that I apologize. So thank you. And I did not mean that this was an endeavor that did not have integrity of its own.
Can I make, I think several people have commented about these are only guidelines, especially Mrs. Gerber. Typically on these kind of statements, you would put something below that kind of said to people, these are whatever appropriate phrase, and so we might want to add that kind of phrase to this document so we have something to lean on when somebody says, but you didn't comply with X. So that I would only make that as a final statement. Oh, one other statement, if I can. A couple of people have said, but which one of these restrict our consultant? I think it was the combination of all of them, not specifically one more than another, but the combination of all. You can't put a plan together and accomplish all of them. So it's more that, and we might want to, when we discuss with the consultant, see if these had to be followed, would you be more creative in what you bring back to us, and see what they say.
I want to move us along. So just the second part of this agenda item was facilities planning principles, which are the principles that are in the long-range facilities plan. There was a lot of duplication. Core facilities, additional classrooms shall not be added without addressing the core facilities that they impact. Class size, covered that. Specialized curriculum, we must provide wherever possible appropriate and dedicated spaces for specialized curriculum needs such as special education, art, music, and technology. I think this speaks to the ed spec and to having specialized spaces for all of our curriculum needs in our buildings. Enrollment projections, a long-term plan shall account for and accommodate peak enrollment projections. Stability, we should strive to create district plans that provide stability for the district students. We should endeavor to plan for stability in our educational system. Whenever possible, redistricting should not be revisited every 3 to 5 years, especially without a major event such as a school opening or closing. Headroom, to ensure stability, we should leave headroom in each school. The maximum number we should plan to is 90%, 85% of capacity. Number 7, commitment to adding space where students are located. And number 8, phase out temporary solutions or portables. I don't want to go, I think there's a lot of repetition there. This is in a document that we've been planning for. If anybody has any thoughts about that in the essence of time, just email them to me, and we can address it further.
And can I, you made a comment.
Yep.
I think this was a voting item, if I recall. And so I think it probably would be appropriate to let the community know that whatever iteration of this comes about will end up being a voting item that, of course, the public will be able to comment on.
Yes, if we,
Is that- is that-
if we revisit, if we rewrite these guiding principles, the public
Then
will
it
have,
will,
have
yeah.
input, and if we form a new document, we will vote on it, there'll be public comment to pass forward. Mr. Asa?
So there was made mention of doing away with the document altogether. Would that be a voting item, or we would just not follow it?
I think the document that exists, I think you'd have to vote on
Eliminating it completely.
Okay, thank you.
eliminating it.
Just was,
Facilities update, Mill Hill floor plan.
It's actually in your packet. This was a request at the last meeting, just to show you where that number comes from. And this is current usage, and just as a reminder, from year to year, they do shift spaces according to how many classrooms they need. But this is what they look like this year. Did you find it? Okay. So what you're seeing on here is the green on the left tells you how they're using those spaces, and that's been pretty traditional. The computer lab, special education, language arts, and math take 3 of those rooms out. On the bottom, what you're seeing is you need 2 more rooms, one for OTPT, which has been at one time out in the trailer. Some of you remember that really old trailer, I think, when you toured, that they were using. They've since moved them to the stage. So OTPT is on the stage now, and their band and strings used to be in a teeny tiny room, and when some of you have toured down at the far end of the building, that tiny space is now used for special needs as well. So you have those 2 shortage areas where you don't have any space. So when you take those out of the rotation, that's where the 273 comes from. So at Mill Hill, if you go in to do a renovation and there's no expansion, and you're going to stick with, I hate to say guiding principles, but I mean, you're sticking with your ed spec, you need those spaces for these children to have adequate space in their building, which does mean redistricting children out of Mill Hill. And if anything, I would hope it would make the case that 378, what they're calling 378, you still have to expand. And I think in their plans, they actually show that as well.
Any questions? Okay, thank you
Uh-huh.
for
Next
this.
one.
Next,
Okay.
Walter Fitzgerald update.
Walter Fitzgerald, just very quickly, we do have a new one-year lease. Mr. Cullen has been reviewing that with Mr. Mayor so that next year we can continue to work with their development firm on what is it they could be able to do in that building. I would say their pace is much slower than we would like as far as looking at the building and really telling us what they're committing to do, but they were willing to work with us and allow more time. So that's where we are. But we do have a lease, which is a good thing. So we'll have a lease in June.
What would you anticipate now that you've gone through a thought that we were going to have to move it? So I'm sure you and staff have talked about a timeline that would be needed. By when do we have to put the figurative gun to their head to say, we need to know what you're going to do to that building and the timeline for addressing that building, or we have to walk? What is the turnaround time that staff needs to be able to say something to that effect?
I would say by the end of next year, they need to be able to give an answer. We expected it the end of February. So if they still have not given you an answer by this time next year, then I would say that maybe the intent or the will is not there to do the magnitude of the work that may need to be done in the building. And we think maybe that's why it's going to take a little bit longer right now, just really looking at the building thoroughly and what really has to be done to bring it up to the piece, up to where it's acceptable for us.
Ms. Jacobson?
I'm just curious, what is their holdup?
Um,
With what they're going to do or not do? I just don't get it.
We identified several, you could call them deficiencies with the building. They've basically, right now, just addressed about one of those 3. Very, very minimal. So they've had the team out, they are reviewing. So I don't know, maybe it's taking them just a lot longer to problem solve how they would approach a building that maybe was in more disrepair than they realized.
Mrs. Mexican.
Has there been any debate that those are deficiencies? I mean, is anyone arguing, no, there is no roof issue? We say, yes, there is a roof issue. I mean, especially obviously the bigger ticket items. But is there any debate, or there's simply, they clearly didn't realize just what level of investment it was going to take.
What my answer to that would be, we haven't been really at the stage to debate yet, but what they have brought us is minimal compared to what our expectation would be. Would you agree with that, Mr. Collin? Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Asa.
And Dr. Jones, just to clarify, through you to Mr. Cullen, we have provided them basically a document, correct, with if we owned that building, what we would have to do to bring it up to standards and code, in essence?
Yes.
Okay.
It's about
So-
20 items.
Okay.
They've addressed about 3 so far,
and so
one of the 3 I'm not
and
happy
we haven't gotten any further, as Dr. Jones has said. But is there any indication that they're on the same page, at least, of what needs to be done, and they just haven't gotten to the point of reviewing it and sending people out and going through their own red tape?
Yeah, I think the delay is that they're realizing they've got to get contractors and engineers out to look at the building that they have really delinquently taken care of. So,
And is it safe to say that dealing with the diocese is maybe slightly different than a traditional commercial landlord?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that, except that the leases we've been getting renewed and working with them on have been very well executed, and they've worked with us.
So I guess what I'm getting at is the delay is not necessarily a lack of an indication 100% that they're not going to want to work with us. It just may be their process is slower.
No, because the 1-year lease has a sentence in the contract that we're willing to work with them on a future renovation type lease.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr.
I
Dwyer.
approach the deadline date from a different perspective. This revised lease gives us the use of the facility till when?
It would be July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2020.
So if on June 30th, you had to move the facility, you had to move the program, could you do it in 2 months?
Yes. It's really equipment. I mean, it doesn't have.
No, could you find a facility
Oh,
and
well,
move it in 2 months?
Well, I believe that if Mr. Cullen and I were both here, we would not be waiting until June. We would expect them to be.
And that's what causes me to ask the question.
Yes.
What is the real deadline based on that we have to start planning on moving that facility by X date to anticipate that?
I'd say June 30th, 2019. We have to have an answer from them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think last questions? All right. The pre-K rubric?
You did get a copy of the pre-K rubric. We do have a couple of slides that we want to go through for you, just so you can see how they scored, so that you can have a little bit more information about the buildings. And this is strictly from a facility standpoint. So we're not thinking about programs that are in buildings. We're not thinking about, this is part of your whole big plan, is that if you were moving children, and in your ideal situation, which buildings meet the criteria the best. So.
Just trying to pull up the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Rob Mancusi, Director of Special
And
Education.
if you can just do a quick review of each slide. You don't have to, we can read along with you, Rob.
Okay, okay. What we did is we strictly looked at facilities, and we applied the rubric to each of our elementary schools to determine right now which buildings are suited right now to serve our needs. So the rubric, as you can see, included ADA accessibility. We looked at drop-off and pickup areas. We looked at internal stairs within the building, as well as elevators. For the HVAC, that was a big one. Does the school have air conditioning primarily? Because our students with disabilities need to be educated in an air-conditioned setting. We looked at the schools in terms of, do they have an existing preschool classroom, or do they have available space to develop a preschool classroom? the condition in which it is, we looked at move-in readiness. Is the building ready to accept us now? And really, probably the biggest one is, and we've talked about this all year so far, are the classrooms in the buildings, do they have bathrooms? And is there room to expand the program into other classrooms with bathrooms? Are we able to have a pre-K wing or a cluster of classes so we're all together as a team? And then just the overall functionality of the building and the ability to just move around the building to access the building. And then we looked at the general location. And then what we did is each of the areas had a rating of 1 to 5, and we got an overall rating. And, okay, and as you can see, let's see. Okay. After we applied the rubric to all the buildings, this is how the schools panned out in terms of readiness to accept us at this time. Burr Elementary and Holland Hill both tied as the top 2 schools according to our rubric, followed by McKinley, Riverfield, Stratfield, Sherman, and then North Stratfield. There is an asterisk by North Stratfield, because North Stratfield, if it were an air-conditioned building, and I know that has been a topic of discussion for the board this year, if North Stratfield were an air-conditioned building, that would go right up to the top behind Holland Hill and Burr as a school. Each of the schools, we have listed strengths and weaknesses. The biggest area for you to point your eye to is that Burr does have 16 classrooms with restrooms. They do have 8 classrooms downstairs, and they have 8 classrooms upstairs. The weakness was there is you do need elevator or an internal or steps to get to the second floor, and we felt that the location of Burr was not a strength. Weaknesses were defined as anything that was rated 1 or a 2. Strengths were defined as anything that was rated a 4 or 5, and a 3 was neutral. So it wasn't listed as a strength or a weakness. I'm not going to read each of these unless you want me to. I'll just highlight some areas. For Holland Hill, it currently has 8 classrooms with restrooms, so there is room for future expansion at both Holland Hill and Burr. The only weakness that we identified for Holland Hill was currently there's no preschool playground. Yeah, but yeah, the cost of a preschool playground is, it's doable. Yeah, it is. McKinley, what really limited McKinley as a viable option was it only has 4 classrooms with restrooms, so there's not a lot of room for future expansion there. Riverfield, the same thing. There's only 4 classrooms with restrooms, so there's limited opportunity for expansion at Riverfield. Stratfield, same thing. 4 classrooms that have bathroom access, so if we wanted to, the opportunity for future expansion, we would not have, currently there's not more bathrooms in that building.
I was just going to add, the other thing we talked about was the impact to kindergarten. So there are buildings like Stratfield has the gang restroom where they can still have easy access to the restroom. Some of the buildings don't have that. So kindergarten would have to travel too far down the hall to go to the restroom if it wasn't in their classroom.
Can I just ask a quick question about the bathrooms? How difficult is it to put a bathroom in a classroom? I don't know that answer.
As we were evaluating, what we were trying to do was look at buildings that were move-in ready, just thinking about, the cost to the district. And certainly if you wanted to go and start putting in restrooms, but there would be a significant cost for most of these buildings to do that. That's not easy work to do.
The next school was Sherman. There is 7 classrooms with restrooms at Sherman. However, some weaknesses there where there's no existing preschool playground. It's really not move-in ready for an early childhood program, and there's limited space for expansion. North Stratfield, as I stated, they don't have elevators or internal stairs, so the functionality of the building is high. There's some alternative space for erect a preschool playground, and they have 13 bathrooms, classrooms with bathroom access. So there would be room for future expansion. This would significantly increase the rating on the rubric if North Stratfield had AC. And then the other elementary schools, Jennings, Osborne Hill, Mill Hill, and Dwight, they scored significantly lower when applying to the rubric. That's why we kind of clumped them into one slide. And they just had a multitude of weaknesses, including lack of AC, no preschool playground, not move-in ready, and limited opportunity for future expansion. So again, after applying this rubric, the top 2 schools that were rated were Burr and Holland Hill. Any questions?
I have a quick question. So I noticed in most of the schools there are 4 classrooms, but we're looking at 5 for the 2, like 5 in one school and 5 in another. Am I correct?
Right now, for long-term?
Yes.
Yes, we would look for long-term. We're looking at duplicating programs across 2 sites right now.
And do you know off the top of your hand how long it would take before we would outgrow those 10 classrooms if we stick to the 50-50 model?
The 50-50 model, which is the way we want to eventually get, I don't have a projection on how long that would be right now. I would say we would want to choose a building that has the opportunity for future expansion, because the trend, as we've seen over the last 9 or 10 years that we've presented the data, we've seen significant growth, particularly
the only reason why I ask is it's important. Say we want to put another bathroom in 2 schools. Maybe we have to look at the long term and that, no, we need 2 bathrooms in each of the schools, because there's a potential in a year or 2 that we're going to need to expand again into another classroom. I'm just throwing that out there. If most of the schools only have 4 classrooms with a bathroom in it, and to make this possible over the long term, we would have to add a bathroom to each classroom at each school.
Well, Burr has 16 bathrooms. Holland Hill has 8 bathrooms. North Stratfield, if they had AC, they have 13 bathrooms. So there's certainly classroom space available for growth, significant growth in those buildings.
If I could add too, even with Mill Hill, we were discussing that just this morning. There are 8 restrooms in Mill Hill when you're getting ready to do an expansion there. So, depending on if it were a 504 and you were going to put a pre-K there, you have the opportunity right now to put an extra bathroom or 2 in there, but it already has 8, which means that you could have 4 sections and still have 4 sections for kindergarten. And that building generally doesn't, it only has 2 or 3. So that doesn't really show up on the rubric, but if you considered it in the construction, it definitely could work.
Just before I take any more questions, we're running short on time. Can I have a motion to extend to 11:15? Mrs. Maxon Canelli, seconded by Ms. Jacobson. All in favor? Come on, it's 2 meetings. Work with me here, guys. Ms. Leeper, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Vitale, Mr. Asa, Ms. Jacobson, Mrs. Maxon Canelli. So how many was that? 6. All right. Motion passes. All right. question, but finish your question, but quick.
My question is just, I wanted to really go back over the facts that whatever two schools we choose, there'll end up being two sections of each, like kindergarten, first grade, second grade. I'm trying to get an idea of how this is going to happen.
So that's another meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just, that's another agenda item for a future meeting.
I just wanted to ask, I guess, said Mill Hill did not have a preschool playground, and Mill Hill has the All Abilities playground, and I know that's not small like a preschool playground, but I was wondering if it would still be appropriate, and I'm just throwing it out there. You don't have to necessarily elaborate on it.
We actually discussed that, and while the playground is very accessible, it's not really appropriate for the little ones from an early childhood perspective. You'd still want to come back in and do a preschool playground.
Mr. Asa?
Just a quick question regarding North Stratfield, and I apologize if you mentioned this and I missed it, but why would North Stratfield be number 3
If you added air conditioning.
Yeah, but why wouldn't it be 1 or 2?
Well, because Burr and Holland Hill were rated higher.
Oh, no, I understand. I was just curious if there was like one thing that stood out, because I was just trying to quickly look at the strengths and weaknesses. But North Stratfield, to me, plus AC.
Why that's not number 1?
Yeah, why? If we had a magic wallet right now,
Yeah,
we could put AC in North Stratfield. Tom Cullen wouldn't retire. That magic wallet would draw him back. Is there a glaring reason?
Well, they also don't have an existing pre-K playground. So that if they got if they had an existing preschool playground, which is not overly costly and had AC, it would rise.
Okay, because I was just looking at Holland Hill because they didn't have a preschool playground either. So I was just curious, not to put you on the spot, but I know a preschool playground is going to be not a cheap addition. I know you said it's minor, and you know it's obviously a cost we'd have to incur, but we're probably looking at over $100,000 for a preschool playground.
The last time I built a preschool playground in my previous district, it was about $23,000.
It'd be between 25 and 30 right now. We'd have to have, but
I just based that off of my experience on the Holland Hill Building Committee and looking at that, and with the requirements for preschool. I would just say we'd have to relook at that because from my recollection, it was considerably higher than that. I could be wrong.
Okay.
and almost all of them needed that except the ones that are at the top.
Yeah.
The other thing is I heard somebody say location. Location was a 3 for North Stratfield instead of a 4 or a 5, just because of, the distance.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
Yeah.
That's true. The location of Holland Hill rated a lot higher.
And just as a very quick budget reminder, I believe we'd budgeted at Stratfield and then had to cut because of the cut. I think it was $43,000, and it didn't even come close to that. We were able to do it at Stratfield, so it definitely is well below 100.
For some reason, something was ringing in my head that the preschool playground had significant higher costs. Again, I could be wrong, but.
Thank you.
You overpaid.
We'll be continuing this discussion. Thank you for putting this together, Ms. Mancusi. And if you can, it'd be just for the future to have these copies of your presentation, just for the public that are here, if you could post it either on the special education website or on the district website, just for members of the public to be able to access
Will
this.
do.
That would be great. All right. Moving right along. Appointment of superintendent search firm. Recommend a motion that the Board of Education appoint Hazard, Young, and Atia and Associates as the search firm to assist in hiring a new superintendent of schools, and authorize the chairman of the board to negotiate a contract based on the response to the RFP dated February 1st, 2019. Can I have a motion? Ms. Pitko, second. Mr. Peterson. This is a voting item. We'll go to the public. Any members of the public want to come forward? Seeing none, back to the board. All in favor? 9-0. Okay, approval of the minutes that the Board of Education.
Calendar.
Sorry. I had two agendas, the dangers of having two agendas. The approval of the amended 2019-2020 student calendar due to the addition of the primary date, April 28th, 2020. Recommend a motion that the Board of Education approve the 2019-2020 amended calendar as enclosed to reflect April 28th, 2020 as a non-school day. You should have the calendar that the board, Dr. Jones put forward. Ms. Maxine Cannelli?
She's making the motion.
I'm sorry. Motion, I'm trying to be so fast. Ms. Maxine Cannelli, seconded by Mrs. Gerber. Discussion, hopefully not too much. Okay. This is a voting item going, sorry, I wasn't.
Have discussion.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Asa.
Just a quick note, on April, before this is published on the website and everything, if we could just maybe add a note under April 13th to 17th, spring break, add the 28th and why it's,
Primary.
yeah, just a purely clerical error, or.
That was my comment.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. To the public, any members of the public like to comment on this? Seeing none, back to the board. All in favor? Motion passes 9-0. Moving on to the approval of minutes, recommend a motion that the Board of Education approve the following minutes: January 8th, 2019 regular, January 15th, 2019 special, January 22nd, 2019 special, January 24th, 2019 regular and special. Can I have a motion? Ms. Pitko, seconded by Mrs. Gerber. All in, any discussion? All in favor? Motion passes 9-0. Thank you. Turn you back, Mrs. Gerber. Superintendent's report.
Just two quick things. First of all, we did get Fairfield Ward's letter from NEAS today that they're going to continue to accredit them, thank goodness. But lots of accolades for them, and once they have their report, we'll share that with you. The Ludlow NEAS visit has gone excellent this week, so thank you to all the board that was there. They really have enjoyed, I think, their time at Ludlow this week. And the third thing I'll mention is we do have all of our climate surveys pushed out, especially for those of you that don't have children that may not see them. We did automate them this year a little bit differently to see if we could start to increase the responses, and we are seeing it's working. Our parent surveys, we had over 2,100 as of today, which is double what we had last year. And same way for our teachers and our staff, we had over 1,000 staff to respond by changing our approach, which, in the past, for some of our principals, they might have had 8 or 10 people from their building that would even take the survey. So we really have made a concerted effort, and we'll keep that open probably for another 2 weeks. The principals are pushing it out in their newsletter again, just to see if we can get as much as we can. So,
any questions for Dr. Jones? Just a quick question about the school climate survey. So there were some questions on this survey that were also on the last survey, so you'll be able to compare?
We only have one survey this year. In the past, we would have, there's a survey that has to be done for evaluation purposes, or that's the way our plan is written in the district, that we have to do every year. Then there's another one that is a climate survey. And if you look at those two, they had almost the same questions on quite a bit. And so when we compared those, we got rid of the redundancy this year. And again, trying to get people to take it. And then we went back through the state standards on making sure all of those domains are hit that we have to for the climate portion. And again, got rid of some of the redundancy that we already knew was in the front end of the survey, to try to get it shorter, where it was basically 3 to 5 minutes is the average time it's taking people, where in the past that was part of the reason, at least the feedback we would get, they were so long, and there were 2 of them. And people would often, it took me the first year and a half to figure out we actually had 2. I couldn't understand why we're doing it twice, because one of them was annual and one of them was every other year. So yeah, we were sending out 2 surveys, and people I think sometimes thought they'd already taken it even though it was for another purpose. So we have one survey that's meeting both of those needs that we can do every year. And the good part for that is we're actually getting climate feedback every year instead of every other year, which meets both of those needs.
But some of the questions that are on this survey were on the last school climate survey. I'm just kind of concerned about, like, for schools that have school climate teams that are doing work.
Yeah.
So they could, if they were targeting one you know,
Every question on this current survey was on the previous survey. Some of the questions that were on the previous survey are not on this survey. If we felt like they were redundant, they were just asking the same thing in a different way. So we've reduced it just to try to get it shorter.
okay. Okay, committee liaison reports. Mr. Peterson?
Well, I can start. From a Board of Finance standpoint, there was a recent meeting that had nothing to do with education content. They talked a lot about whether the town's defined contribution plan should be overseen by the pension board, and that went back and forth. But the most important thing is that we're going to begin examination of the budget on Thursday with the town side, and then the board is going to present before them on Monday, the 18th. So tune in for that. In terms of Holland Hill Building Committee, everything seems like it's well on track. They're in the process of tiling bathrooms and completing ceiling grids in some spaces. The one thing that I think was notable is that the chair, Tom Quinn, said he was going to try to get the air conditioning on in the gym in time for graduation as just a nice gesture to the community. So he made no promises, but he mentioned that as a priority. He also gave me some grief for missing a couple of building meetings that were rescheduled because of snow and conflicted with the Board of Education, so I went right back at him. I've been getting grief from that man since 1981.
Ms. Sleeper?
Just want to share that the RTM passed the capital non-recurring budget.
PT Council met last night. I missed part of it just because we had our meeting. Did give my report. We talked about just let them know that we were talking about redistricting and facilities utilization. You know, they seemed like they had a very good turnout, which was nice to see last night. SEPTA presented, and that's about it for PTA Council. For Roger Sherman, we can expect to see them back. They're probably going to be looking to revise the ed spec to exclude the back drop-off loop that they were discussing, and possibly, most likely, the stage renovation. I don't know if you have any information on that, but I don't, but be prepared for that to come back to us probably within the next month or two. Ms. Jacobson?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yep.
Just a quick question on that. So if we do, just procedurally, if we do make a modification to the ed spec, those other items still are going to need attention, per se. So what is the process of creating a phase 4?
That will be a discussion on what the items that do not get done.
Okay,
We'll
so
have
that's
to
just
see,
out
we'll
there
have to
till
see
we-
what
okay.
it is and where it will fall into our planning and our capital waterfall. And I would say Mr. Cullen, but he quite possibly will not be with us at that time, so that'll be
Okay.
nice to get it all wrapped up by April 30th, but I'm not too optimistic on that. And really, the building committee takes the guidance from the Board of Selectmen, so really waiting to see what guidance they get from.
Okay, and are we gonna, so will the Board of Selectmen be involved prior to them coming to us to request a change to the ed
Yes.
spec, since the charge is given from the first selectman?
They're going to be going to the Board of Selectmen first, probably before coming back to us.
Thank you.
In my last conversation with
Okay.
the building chair. Ms. Jacobson?
So I sent everyone a few days ago the latest round of legislation going to public hearing in various committees pertaining to public schools, teachers, students, et cetera, to you all. I'm happy to answer any questions on any of those items that you were able to review, and also possibly raise to this board the concept if there's anything in particular that the board may consider lending its voice to in terms of its advocacy. I'm happy to coordinate that or talk about it with anyone who either in full or in part would like to do that as a board. That's pretty much my quick update, but we don't have much time.
Right.
But I'll
Does
leave it
anybody
to
have
you
any
guys.
questions about any of Mr. Peterson?
Well, I just would like to second that, and I've talked to the chair about this independently. There are a lot of bills that are floating around that could hit us directly as a town, as a district. Things specifically of there's a House Bill 7319, which is going to be up for public hearing this coming Friday, the 15th, which if you read it, would invest boards of education with the power to lay taxes and borrow money, basically taking the Board of Finance out of the loop. I did a lot of legwork on researching this over the weekend. I've gotten kind of conflicting answers about how much traction it's going to get, but I think that we all need to be aware of these things floating around in Hartford that could radically reshape the way towns do business and how Board of Eds do business. And I would like to, at some point in the future, have this almost be an agenda item for us to decide whether, as a board, we want to make a statement on these matters, on regionalization, on pension contributions. There are a lot of things that are going to hit us in ways that will change the way we do business going forward, and I would look forward to the possibility of having a discussion as a board on that topic.
Mr. Asa?
I agree with you. I think there's a couple bills out there. I have seen other districts put out official letters on behalf of the Board of Education. And it is something that, obviously, if a letter is going out on behalf of the Fairfield Board, we all need to be on board with that. So it is something that I do think we should talk about.
To that point, I would just ask board members if there's any particular, there's a lot of information that Ms. Jacobson sent to us. If there are anything in particular that you feel we should be discussing as a body, please send them to me, copy Ms. Jacobson, and we can put it on the future agenda. In the meantime, aside from being your legislative update, it's your committee report. In the meantime, I would encourage everybody to give individual testimony on these. Things are happening fast, and we only meet once a month. So I wouldn't want our voice to be quieted as individuals. So if you have any questions about how to do that, reach out to Jen. Ms. Pitko?
I just want to ask a quick question. Are you going up on Friday, or are you looking for testimony?
I will be going up on Friday as my
Okay.
own self, and probably testifying on Friday, not on behalf of this board or any view of the board, just as myself. I'm just putting it to the board, as others have mentioned, that if there is anything in particular that the board felt compelled to lend its voice to in terms of our voice to it, then we can consider doing that, as many others have done. So I'm just bringing up the option and availability to do it, but as Mrs. Vitale mentioned, it's fast and furious. So if you would like to do that, we should do it quickly.
I can't go, but I'd like to submit. Mr. Peterson and I have talked extensively about it. So, thank you for your emails, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, welcome.
And I'm sorry that I couldn't devote more time to it for this agenda.
It's totally fine.
Anybody, Mrs. Maxine Kennelly?
Ready for open board comment.
Anybody else, committee reports? SEPTA, anything?
They canceled.
Sweet 16?
That's true. I don't have the date on me, though. April 6th.
April 6th, SEPTA Sweet 16. Be there or be square, everybody. Sorry to steal your report there. All right. Anybody else? Okay, open board comment. Mrs. Maxine Kennelly.
Two things. Just one thing, actually, I was going to put out regarding the Sweet 16. As a reminder to board members that they are soliciting for donations of services, and there's a whole host of ways that you can serve children or whatever, albeit tutoring or whatever. Everyone has areas of expertise. Everyone has something that they can serve. So just as a thought to go on their link, which I think most of us have probably seen on Facebook, if nothing else, and consider doing that kind of a donation for an auction item. And then secondly, very excited that we have, and I'm going to communicate that energy level out through the TV and to our staff here, that we have, I actually lost count, 15 to 20 Odyssey of the Mind teams competing this Saturday. I am very excited by that, and also a very, very sincere thank you to Mrs. Pitko, who, when I asked, stepped up to provide a judge, to be a judge for one of the teams. So very appreciative of that, and very excited for this weekend's competition.
Ms. Pitko?
I am very excited to go to the Townwide Choral Festival this Sunday at 7. I've been waiting 3 years for this. Thursday. Sorry, Thursday at 7:30? 7. I'm so excited for this.
And for board members who haven't gone in the past, they generally do reserve a section for board members to sit at. So contact one of the staff when you walk through the door.
You should have registered. We got an email about that. Mr. Dwyer.
I would just like to acknowledge that our executive director of HR is back in the house. So thank you. Welcome back.
Okay, anybody else? All right, public comment. Any members of the public? Please state your name, address for the record.
Hi, Jill Vergara, 271 Old Post Road. I wanted to make a comment on the redistricting guiding principles. I know that this was just a first discussion, and I appreciate that you are all transparent with how you're thinking, and I think that that's really important to have this discussion with the public and enable public comment. In the interests of brevity, I had a lot of things that I wanted to say, but I know we're butting up on time. What was most important for me to say was that I'm hoping that you reconsider your views on the walkers and bussers. To me, this was one of the most important principles. I am a walker, so I have seen how impactful it is for my family. I think Jessica discussed the issue of cost avoidance, which I think is an important issue, but it's also, there's health impacts as well. I can feel myself feeling better when we walk to school and when we walk back from school, and I know that it prepares my kids better when they're walking to school. And there are also environmental impacts that I think the town should be conscious of. So I'm really hopeful that you will take into consideration walkers and not moving them into becoming bussers. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. Motion to adjourn. Mr. Asa, seconded by Mrs. Mexicanelli. All in favor? 9-0. Thank you for extending, everybody.